هذا ماسكينه لحاله بالقابة مفكرينه انه مهرب، فمكسرين ايديه وضاربينه، فقالوا اعطاكم عمره.
حتى هي آخر مرة طلبنا مي قالوا فوتوا اشربوا من التواليت.
They keep looking at you, at your skin, and they keep, giving you some words like you are a dog, you are shit, or you are something like that.
The voices you just heard belong to the men who decided to share their stories with us. The stories that they share are those of a pushback. What you see is the land border between Greece and Turkey, a border that stretches out along the Evros-Meric River for over 206 kilometers. It marks the border between torment and freedom for the hundreds who try to cross every year. Evros, a region known to many Greeks as the land of rain, is an area that underwent many challenges in the past. Challenges which carved time onto its streets by the palpable void in its townships. More notable than the changes to its population, however, are the changes to its territory. Driven by already pre-existing tensions between the two neighboring states, a significant increase in militarization has drastically reshaped the formerly naked shores.
The river has undergone a gradual yet very specific transformation in the past 100 years since it first became a border. The border was first designed in 1926 on the map. It was first drawn on the map then, in the aftermath of the Treaty of Lausanne. But it was not tailored to follow the river. A river moves and a border doesn't. So this creates geographies of tension that we saw were overtly weaponized this past March in what came to be called the March events. So these ambiguous territories where the river has shifted away from the border now act as moments where border violence concentrates.
The scenarios described by Professor Levidis at the time of our recording as last March's events is indeed the chaos by which the majority of us got to discover the relevance of Evros. Back in early spring of 2020, after President Erdogan opened up Turkey's borders for refugees and migrants to continue their journey, Greek authorities reacted by labeling the act a hybrid invasion and decided to open fire into the crowd that was trapped in no man's land.
They shot him! Oh God! Oh my God!
Excusing thereby all existing norms and frameworks in place regarding the reception of new arrivals.
And this was doubled down by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who visited Evros on the 3rd of March. So a day after a person, Mohammed Al-Arab, had been shot dead in Evros.
يعني راحوا السباحة شي 5 دقايق لعبوا شي بالزورق شي 5 دقايق كان محمد أنا بتوقع أعطاك يا عمرو.
And a day before, another person was shot dead, Mohammed Gulzar, both of which killings we investigated with forensic architecture.
We obtained photographs showing Gulzar being carried by medical personnel on a stretcher. His face, shorts and belt help us confirm his identity. We can also see a small entry wound which appears consistent with a bullet wound.
And she called Evros the shield of Europe. So there's this whole mythical imaginary of Evros as the last barrier of Europe and of Greece.
I thank Greece for being our European Aspida in these times.
Translate Aspida as shield.
We have visual evidence that there was use of live rounds. We also know that there was aggression used. We also know that there were tear gas and other means. Even some new and niche technologies from the Greek side, for example, sound cannons. So this is something that went down in history as far as the Greek state is concerned, as an invasion that was, that people had to defend the Greek border.
Κοιτάξτε, τότε το Μάρτι γινόταν ένας πανικός. Μιλάμε για χιλιάδες κόσμο, οι οποίοι εμείς κληθήκαμε από την αστυνομία και από το στρατό, σαν ψαράδες και σαν ανθρώποι που γνωρίζουμε καλά το σημείο του Δέλτα του Εύρου, εκεί που γινόταν τα περιστατικά και οι προσπάθειες για να μπουν μέσα στο ελληνικό το έδαφος. Είχε πάρα πολύ ένταση όλο αυτό, γινόταν ένας πανικός, προσπαθούσαν να περάσουν με τον τρόπο της βίας μέσα και γινόταν ένας ψιλοχαμός. Κατόπιν της εντολής του στρατού και της αστυνομίας πηγαίναμε και προσπαθούσαμε να αποθήσουμε τους ανθρώπους που θέλαν να μπουν μέσα στο ελληνικό το έδαφος. Και αυτό κάναμε και τίποτα παραπάνω.
There was this looming threat of millions, the way it was described, like hundreds of thousands of people that were going to storm and attack the country in what is still, up until this day, being called an invasion, and how an invasion was averted. So when the government talks about it, that's what they're going to say.
Europe will not be blackmailed by Turkey over the refugee issue. We stand ready to support Turkey in dealing with its refugee problem and find a solution to the Syria conundrum, but not under these circumstances. My duty is to protect the sovereignty of my country. At the same time, Greece is also doing Europe a great service.
The documented hostility and gruesomeness by which the March events unfolded served as a wake-up call for many already concerned about the EU's human rights track record. Putting the border guards on the Duras, however, helped us to understand a larger issue that reaches beyond the events of March 2020.
Evros is not a static, like the border crossing aspect of Evros is changing. It's changing throughout the years. And there has been many different phases. I mean, one should not forget that back in the day there were minefields that were active, lethal, with lethal consequences as well, that were a sort of prevention measure for the most part, but on the other hand, you know, led to casualties. The landscape of you know, potential of crossing the river is changing, and after 2020 we see, and especially this point in time, like March 2020, we see a more official turn towards what we now call pushback practices, or as the Greek state calls them, prevention of entry, or you know, in a way motivating people not to cross. Like, that's how the Greek state would want to call it. But the history of Evros when it comes to that is very long, in terms of we have people being pushed back or people forcibly removed since the 90s, and I guess even before that.
We need to remember they have been practiced in Evros since, well, the late 80s possibly. And certainly from the 90s onwards, there is plenty of evidence of systematic pushbacks in Evros. And there is definitely evidence that the practice picked up in 2017-2018.
We have agreed to have an integrated strategy against all instabilities in the neighborhood of Europe, and also to work together shoulder to shoulder regarding the refugee crisis.
After the launching of the EU-Turkey statement, which you know what has caused to the field of the protection of basic human rights, but what it does is to stop refugees who come to the Aegean Islands and to subject them into a procedure regarding their possibility of being sent back to Turkey. So that, as it is not applied in the Evros border, shifted the flows of the migrants to some extent. Instead of them following mainly the Aegean Island, this route by sea, they also chose to come via the Evros border.
So crossings moved back to Evros after having moved to the islands around 2012 or so, because of the fortification of the border at that time. I mean, measures such as the first wall between Nevis and Cassagnes being built then, and also the deployment of more police officers in Evros under Espida, and the expansion of various technologies of surveillance, but then as well, like thermal cameras and so on.
Thus, despite having proof of pushbacks occurring continuously for the last 4 decades, experts regard the EU-Turkey deal to be
the turning point where pushback became a real part, a routinized, normal activity of the Greek authorities towards the halting of migration flows.
Pushbacks.
Pushbacks. Pushing them back.
Pushbacks.
Pushing back migrants.
Known as a pushback.
Violent pushback.
Pushbacks.
Pushing migrants back. Pushbacks. Pushbacks.
Since 2020-2021, we see that the aggression has developed. We see that there is more violence. We hear more numbers of people being pushed back on every single day. But we also have a denial of these practices. So I think this is the conjunction point between the two, is what makes Evros more difficult as a space than ever, because not only you have human rights violations happening, you have a complete lack of investigating these human rights violations, and you also have a complete denial that these violations happen in the first place.
Prime Minister Mitsotakis, when at last will you stop lying? Lying about the pushbacks, lying about what's happening with the refugees in Greece. Please don't insult mine and neither the intelligence of all the journalists in the world. There has been overwhelming evidence, and you keep denying and lying. This is like narcissistic abuse. Why are you not honest? Why don't you say, Brussels left us alone? We waited for 6 years. Nobody did anything. We need to relocate. They don't do it now. I have my say. And yes, I do cruel, barbarian pushbacks.
In their crudest form, pushbacks, according to the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, entail a variety of state measures aimed at forcing refugees and migrants out of their territory, while obstructing access to applicable legal and procedural frameworks. In doing so, states circumvent the safeguards governing international protection, including minors, detention or custody, expulsion, and the use of force. In practice, this leads us to stories like the one of Amin, one of the men whose voices you heard in the beginning of this film.
Well, I did try like 4 times, but the first time actually you had, it's like you got a lot of stress. You just you don't know your destination. You don't know what's gonna happen next. You don't have any image of what you're gonna face after you cross. And when you cross, you just have like a lot of energy in your body that you just keep you going, because and you hear from others what's gonna happen. So you just cross and you keep walking.
We crossed the river to Greece, and then we walked. The first day we walked about 18 hours. We walked a lot. Then the second day and the other days, we just walked in the evening. It was a very hard way.
And one which does not spare its passenger from the elements of the terrain. From the increasingly harsher conditions in summer, the sheer terrors of winter.
كانت براس الجبل على أعلى شيء منطقة كنا فيه. تمام، علم هون على أساس تجينا السيارات. ظلينا 3 أيام هون ما احنا حاسبين حساب أكلنا وشربنا على أساس ليلة واحدة هون مقطوعين من المي ومن الأكل ومن الشرب. انظر الدنيا ننام يعني تحت المطر تحت كل شيء.
Κοιτάξτε, τώρα πάμε λίγο πιο παλιά. Που αυτό μου έχει μείνει και το λέω συνέχεια. Ήταν 2 γυναίκες. Η θερμοκρασία έξω ήταν -3 βαθμούς. Ήταν εξυπόλυτες μέσα στα νερά, μέσα στον πάγο. Και όταν πήγα να τις πάρω και τη φωνάζανε, η μία δεν μπορούσε να περπατήσει. Και την πήρα αγκαλιά με την βάρκα και την πήγα να τη ζεστάνω στην καλύβα, να τους συνειφέρω τις γυναίκες. Ήταν από τη Σομαλία, ήταν 2 γυναίκες από τη Σομαλία, 2 αδερφές. Όταν πήρα τα ρούχα τους, όταν ξεκίνησα να βγάζω τα ρούχα για να τις δώσω στεγνά, την ώρα που τράβηξα τις κάλτσες, από τα πόδια τους, φύγαν και τα νύχια μαζί, από τα κρυοπαγήματα.
In a way, once somebody crosses the Evros, if the temperature is not very high, if the river is deep, and they get soaking wet outside the river in December or March, then they will die. There's very few chances they will not die.
My name is Paulos Pavlidis. I'm professor of forensic medicine, and I'm responsible for the Greek land border. I am here from in the last 20 years, 22 years. All these years, the total number from the people who died in the border, it's about 660 people died only from the Greek side. I suppose the same number is from another side, but we don't know that. The most of them, they died from the drowning. After that, the second cause of death is hypothermia. But in the last years, in the last 3-4 years, we have many cases who died from the traffic accident.
To not be caught, to not be figured out that you are crossing and refugee. That's all the idea that you have to maintain when you are trying to cross.
Thus people resorting to increasingly dangerous crossings. Maintaining secrecy after the landing at times presents precarious consequences. These routes, however, more often than not, arise out of limitations to other pathways.
أتوقع 100% كانوا مبلغ علي تبليغ من قبل الناس يعني، ومن مكتب الباصات هو نفس المكتب، أصحاب المكتب لأني أنا كنت أسألهم، أتوقع من عندهم صار التبليغ.
المهم لما وجينا وصلنا خيتوه هي في محطة مثل المحطة هيك بلور كله بلور والدنيا برد شوي، كنا لان تعبنا خلاص حاج بدنا نقعد، قعدنا فيه. شافنا واحد منها اليونانية صاحب بيت جدا من هناك، والله جانا شاف ضحك علينا وهيك، وشاف هذا ضحك شيء، دق تلفون، قلنا دق تلفون بلكي إن شاء الله جاتنا النجدة يا ربي.
Κοιμόμαστε μία βόλτα από τη Χιλή μέχρι σκοπό βολής, έχω φορτώσει 25 κομμάτια. 25 κομμάτια έχω εδώ μέσα στο τρέιλερ. Ανοίξε λίγο. 25 κομμάτια. Ανοίξε λίγο το στήρμα. Θα μας κάψουν αυτοί ρε πούστη, θα μας κάψουνε. Οπ! Βλέπετε, κλείσε. 25 κομμάτια τα μπάσταρδα. Έχει γεμίσει όλο το βουνό, παιδιά. Έχει γεμίσει όλο το βουνό. Όλο το βουνό έχει γεμίσει, γάμου τη τρέλα τους μέσα ρε πούστη. Αυτοί είναι ορκισμένοι. Άστο, γάμισε. Αυτοί είναι ορκισμένοι να μας κάψουνε. Γεμάτα τα πουρνάρια. Γεμάτα τα πουρνάρια. Παντού. Αυτό σας λέω παιδιά. Οργανωθείτε. Οργανωθείτε. Βγείτε όλοι να τους μαζέψουμε. Θα μας κάψουνε. Αυτό σας λέω μόνο.
80% من الناس كانوا يخبروا عن سامي. أنا محاول مرتين بالباصات. هم يبلغوا البوليس، يعني من قبل يبلغوا البوليس مثلا إذا ركبت معاهم أنا مثلا أو هيك، يعني يبلغوا البوليس إنه في شخص هيك.
Εγώ προσωπικά όχι, γιατί πάντα ενημερώνουμε στρατό και αστυνομία και μετά κινούμαστε ή κάνουμε οποιαδήποτε κίνηση μας δώσει ο στρατός.
Five officer. They came in jeeps. It was like a, I didn't imagine that. So like, too fast. We've been like running and walking, but they did figure out where we are exactly.
We see sometimes state agents apprehending people directly after they cross over. So as opposed to jumping right over the border fence, just crossing over the river, sometimes people are apprehended right then. Other times they're apprehended while walking in a local village, for instance, often by racial profiling. And other times people are apprehended in the interior of the country, in the mainland, again, generally by racial profiling. We see raids of buses and trains.
People were being apprehended and picked up and pushed back, not only in the Evros region, but much further, much deeper into the Greek mainland, sometimes from just the streets in Thessaloniki or the surroundings, but then even from inside camps, refugee camps outside Thessaloniki, and even in Igoumenitsa on the other side of Greece at the Albanian border. People were taken out of camps and then driven across the country to the Evros border and pushed back from there.
There's abandoned buildings, squats where the people are living either in large groups or small groups. And this area is heavily policed. So the police come around, almost daily at distribution, we have civilian police coming and watching our activities. And the police, they come around and they try to pick up people without documents. They also do checks of the local area. And actually in June last year, we had an incident where there was a police raid during one of our distributions. And 30 people were collected without documents and pushed back to Turkey the same day. It used to be that pushbacks were kind of like in the footfall area of the border, but as of 2020, everything changed. And especially under the increased restrictions of the pandemic and, the guise of everybody looking in the other direction, we saw pushbacks ramped up massively. And we saw that pushbacks started happening from around the city of Thessaloniki and also in the surrounding refugee camps, like in Diavata. And it's actually become quite a normal process now. Even last week, somebody came who was a brand new arrival. They took food, they took the basic clothes. I gave them a ticket to get shoes the next day. And he never showed up, and he actually called me 2 days later from Turkey saying that as he left the center after he took clothes, he was pushed back to Turkey, and he apologized for not coming to his shoe appointment.
The majority of the people that I speak to around here want to apply for asylum and they don't know how, and it's not that easy to do unless you have a very, very, very severe vulnerability. It's exceedingly difficult to access the asylum procedure and actually approach the asylum service and let them know that you want to apply for asylum. In the meantime, for as long as you're undocumented, you don't have access to any services, and you also don't have any protection from deportations.
I don't know what the problem.
Even from here in Thessaloniki and
Thessaloniki, yeah. Everybody goes Thessaloniki, everybody catch police, deport.
So the police are responsible for transferring people who have entered the territory irregularly to the reception and identification center, which is where people are supposed to be processed, so verifying their identity, their country of origin, and processing their applications for asylum. And the local reception and identification center for northern Greece is in Phylakio.
No asylum give me, and the police are going arrest police station going after one bus, two bus people store to deport us from both.
So they come around with the buses to deport you?
Deport.
From here?
This time police arrest me to deport us from both.
The Phylakio center is very near the border, and we have heard reports that police are escorting people to detention centers and then subsequently pushing them back over the border. So the police being responsible for transferring people to the reception and identification center at the border, it's a cause of concern for us.
هلا انت بتعرف انه دائما الواصلين الجدد لنيو ارايفلز في لهم مركز استقبال قريب من اورسيادا اسمه فلاكيو، وهذا مركز الاستقبال بياخذ معلومات، فيك تشوف منظمات، فيك تشوف محاميين. هذا طبعا لك. صار معك هالشيء؟ اخذوك لمركز الاستقبال شيء ولا كانوا لا يرحلونك؟
فورا يرحلونك. تيجي بتقول له مثلا بدي سندويشه او هذا بيقول لك 50 يورو، وهن بياخذوا بيقشطوك المصاري بيقول لك 50 يورو.
A person who has not undergone reception procedures and is arrested in Thessaloniki it's not provided by the law to be led to Phylakio for the reception condition procedures to apply. He is detained according to the law. He should be detained in Thessaloniki and then maybe to a pre-removal detention center in the northern Greece. So a person who from Thessaloniki is arrested and then driven back to Evros at the same day, this takes place because it's a pushback operation.
The few chances available to register for asylum that would not include police assistance, and police effectively arresting and detaining people only to push them back. Many remain unable to access their rights, which are granted, among others, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, Article 18, the right to asylum, Article 19, stating the prohibition of collective expulsions, as well as the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 4, stating the very same prohibition. All of this goes to show that the next steps cannot be excused on any grounds as legal or formal.
والله يا أختي جونا وركبونا بالفوكسة، وأخذوا منا التلفونات وأخذوا منا شنات هدومنا كلها وركبونا بالفوكسة ومشينا. قلنا إن شاء الله على مشفى، بس نقول له ده قال لازم علاج. والله يا أختي ما يفهمون علينا، نفهم عليهم شيء. ركبونا ونحس حالنا كأنه إحنا عاد الفوكسة مقلقة، ما نشوف شيء خالص.
نص الجسر عم وقفونا نزلوا يمين. شوفير السيارة ضربوه، وحد شوفير في واحد معنا من الجروب كمان نزلوه ضربوه على كتفه كسروا له كتف الملبس، صار الدم عم يشر من هون. وقت صار الدم عم يشر جابوا له مي وهيك غسل وشه كرمال ما يبين الدم على حدا رايح جاي. وبالمقفات تمينا ناطرين شي ساعة وشوي، اجت سيارة بشكل زي الدرمش، بس انه في إلها قلبة من جوا محصنة، يعني كل شخص بيقعد لحاله، بسكر عليه بيقعد لحاله.
منهم لما زتنا بالسيارة تشرح صورة الخلود، تصور خلودة.
ليش صورني عندك صور؟
قام يضحك.
ايه قام يضحك علي.
شو يصير له يضحك؟ ترى خلود صورة منين؟ ترى منين؟
يقولون عني انه هذا ايش هالمخلوق هذا؟ يضحكون علي انه هذا مو بشر.
هي السيارة من برا مو مكتوب عليها لا بوليس ولا إشي، بس ما بعرف إذا نمرتها مدنية ولا لا، لأنه لما صرنا نعدي على الهيجيسيه تبع الطرق ما توقف، بس يزمر لهم ويضل ماشي.
صار يصيح علي إنه خدني على حيط، قال لي وقف على الحيط ودير وجهك. ضلوا موقفين شي ربع ساعة أو نص ساعة ما يقارب هيك، إلا إجت سيارة بيض للكماندوس وقتها وحطوني بيها وهم راحوا.
The legendary white vans, yes. In any case, they have featured a lot in testimonies of pushbacks, providing some kind of transport. During fieldwork, I saw them everywhere. I want to say everywhere, I mean every police station, border guard station seems to have some kind of white van parked nearby. Poros, they were there, Himonio, they are permanently there, yeah.
So what happens usually is that people are being picked up, let's say Thessaloniki or around. They are taken first to a police station in the city.
ساحة يعني كلها سياحة كلها مطاعم والمخفر صاير على الطريق نفسه. فوتونا ونظامي بوليس نظامي.
Where they are kept for a while until they are transferred to other vehicles who then drive them closer to the land border with Turkey.
مشوا فينا باتجاه الحدود، مشينا شي 4 ساعات تقريبا.
And then often they are detained in another police station somewhere on the way.
To quarantine in the first, then they take us in a big truck to the border in the night.
Where they are kept for a few hours up to a few days.
سجنونا يمكن من الضحى، هي قلت لك الساعة 7 الصبحيات للساعة 4 المساء.
It's a whole chain of officers and police stations and detention sites that are used in those pushbacks.
بعدين قال كل واحد معاه موبايل يطلعه ويحطه هان. أخذوا الموبايلات كلها اللي معنا.
They just took all what we have like phones, power banks, money.
طرف اليونان شلحونا كل شيء يعني. شلحونا حتى المصاري أخذوها حتى الجوالات. أنا قلهم اعطوني جوالي.
المعاملة كانت من أول مرة مسكنا فيها الكوماندوس السلموني، حطوني بالمعتقلة. هو كان في كمان كتير جنسيات، كان أكثر من 50 شخص بينهم نساء وأطفال ورجال. فكانت المعاملة سيئة جدا جدا جدا مع العالم، يعني سيئة كتير المعاملة كانت. والمحاولات الباقية كمان المعاملة أسوأ بأسوأ بكتير كمان، لدرجة إنه ما يعترفون إنه في بشر قدامهم، يعني ما يعترفوا على هذا الشيء.
They keep humiliating you from time to time to just, never let you go back again and treating you especially with the baton and all that, beating your face every time you cross.
When the police catch me, I told him I need a lawyer.
Did you say that you're from Syria?
I tell him I'm from. He asked me, "You're from where?" I told I'm from Syria.
Did you have document with you, passport?
No, I have my ID.
He have a Syrian ID that telling he's a lawyer. With a photo and the name.
I asked him, I need a lawyer. He is ضحك.
He got laughed at him and said, "We will see if you can get a lawyer."
Did you have the chance to apply for asylum or to speak to lawyer or translator?
No. We all the time they are shouting to us.
Take any paper you have, you know, they don't let you. One of the guy they met, they took his passport and split, you know, cut it in two pieces. He was begging for his passport, they didn't turn him back.
هلا الاوراق اللي معك شو هي؟ هلا عندي دفتر العائله، هوايانا السوريه، هوية الإعاقة، رابور الطبي عندنا، مثلا هوايات التركيه.
بس بكل الاحوال هن اصلا ما سالوكم عنهم.
هم يفتشونا ايش في عنا بحوزتنا، بياخذونه عبوه شنطات بس بحرقوه، لانه لما جابونا ونزلونا خلود كتم هواتف وكتم شنطايات يشتكي، قالوا هذول بدهم يحرقونا قدامنا.
شلحونا أواعينا
took all of their clothes
وفتشونا 4 مرات
and searched them for 4 times with humiliation moves.
وهلي لقوا معهم مصاري ظاهرين أخذوهم.
And they took all of their money.
وهلي مخبيهم
and who's hiding the money.
أكل قتلة بزيادة.
جابونا لعند هذا المخطر، فقام ينزلونا واحد يفتشونا تفتيش كامل، تشلح خالص، تقعد تقوم 2-3 يضربنا واحد من الضباط ببورية بيضاء تمام وقلبها الشيء مثل الرمل، لأنه كل ما يميلها كأنه في رمل بقلبها.
He took off my underwear and he touched me from private places.
فبعد ما صفونا على الحيط اجت سيارة فيها 7 أو 8 أشخاص، بيناتهم المهم 3 نساء، تمام، فقاموا يفتشوهم. فهذا هو نفسه صار يمد ايديه بصدر النسوان، ببطنهن، يعني بأماكن حساسة. فالزلم الزوج عصب، فقام نزلوا بالأرض وصار يضربوا لما كسر له ايديه.
هاي هي توطى الراس لليونان والكل إنسان، يعني اللي عنده إنسانية وعنده.
They beat everyone. They don't care. They just, you know, they don't have any shame. They just, you know, if you obey their order, you are okay. If you don't, then you face the hell on them. You face their anger. They keep hitting you. Even there was, you know, Syrian women. She was like, you know, hiding her money. They checked her. They were men. They checked her. They found the money. Then slap her on her face.
ياخذون منا الهدوم لما يفسقونا نريد نلبس جوا، مكان ما يسوونا، مكان ما يشلحون، يقولوا لا تروحن برا، تروحن برا، يعني تعال تشوفنا كل الناس. هي كذا معاملة، هي معاملة.
Like 1,090 testimonies that exist on the BVMN database, 225 include women, and obviously as a result include children often as well, as young as like months old, you know, carrying in your arms, rather than children who are older. But there are a lot of minors that sit around the age of like 10 to 16 and often aren't spared of the violence, and even if they are, they will have their families, they'll watch their families being beaten, like their dads or their older brother, or even sometimes the mums. So that mental scar that sits with the children for the rest of their life will just be unimaginable.
There
was a recent instance on Friday. I took a testimony whereby someone was saying that they were apprehended in Greece, and there were 15 of them who were apprehended. There was a group of 50, but some of them ran away, and the respondent wasn't able to see what was going on, but could hear the sounds of a baton, like a big baton. He remarked that it was about 3 to 4 feet long, and children screaming and children crying. And then when he was able to be taken up and taken into the back of the van, where they were then taken to the detention site and then consequently pushed back, he could see women crying and they had marks on their arms, and same with the children. So even though often children are spared, it seems to be that some officers are so relentless, they don't really care who they're beating, they will just beat.
During the apprehension and in detention, and during the actual pushback, people usually, and in the cases from Greece to Turkey, it's about 90%, more than 90% of cases that involve one or more forms of violence. And those forms of violence, they usually include beatings with either with hands or batons or sticks, branches, metal poles. There's kicking, there's sometimes electric discharge weapons being used. There are some certain, like individual instances where people were burned with cigarettes, where they were immersed in water.
ضربني بعصاي قال من اخي، يعني هو كان ناوي يضربني على راسي، بس انا بعدت راسي شوي قمت اشت هيك الضربه من هون.
بس انه شيك هو طلعت تعربش لعنده لفوق، فوق الشيك حاطين تيل مانا هذا بيجي مدور. وقفت انا فوق منه وصرت اعيط للجو العالم، وكل العالم يعني صارت تشوفني وتتفرج علي. حتى في ناس من السوريين او فايتين على الكام في معهم تليفونات، يعني هونيك فيك تشيل تليفون عادي، يعني حتى طلع عليهم صاروا بيصوروا فيا. يعني كل شيء بالكام صار يشوفني، يعني ما في محل، يعني كل العالم بالكام شافتني، كانوا موظفين او غيره ما بعرف، كله شافني. يعني اجى البوليس لعندي كلبجوني، حطوا الكلبجات في ايدي من هون، حطوني لورا كلبجوني وصرنا نمشي. جابوني لعند سيارة البوليس، حملوني سيارة البوليس، اخذوني على المركز على السجن. عدت فيه تقريبا شي ساعة، بعدين حتى حولوني كمان من السجن هذا على سجن تاني. السجن التاني هذا اللي على طول بنيجي لعنده. اجينا لعند السجن كمان. طبعا هون يعني صار لي 3 أيام بلا أكل أبدا، بلا أكل بلا شرب بلا أبدا شيء. يعني وصلت عند الكم عند السجن، طلبت منهم ماي ما أعطوني، طلبت منهم أكل ما أعطوني كمان.
Greece's detention policy is highly problematic, and it has been highly criticized by UNHCR, NGOs, the European Court of Human Rights.
هلا انا مره فت لقيت فيها 82 فل، يعني معبايه فوق بعضهم، نسوان واولاد ورجال. هاي المره فت لقيت فيها 6 اشخاص، بعد ساعه ونص كانت فل.
The conditions are horrible, and that's why Greece has been condemned many times by the European Court of Human Rights for the violation of Article 3 of the Convention regarding torture and inhuman and degrading treatment.
أنا عاد أبكي، والله أبكي وأترجم وأقول لهم مو لازم، يعني مش شفنا سجن قلنا معناته إيش فيه، أريد بس أخذ هذا على العلاج، أشكل لهم عن جسمهم ويشوفون، بس أضحك لهم هيك يغبون عيونهم هيك، يسوون هيك ما يضحكون عليه.
كانوا يعترفوا على هذا الشيء، يعني لدرجة مرة إنه لقونا وكان في طفل تعبان كثير وهو أمه كانت حامل، يعني وكنت أنا عم أساعده هو وأمه. يعني قام تطلب منه، عمر الطفل 3 سنين، كان تطلب منه إنه تقول له أعطينا مي، كانوا معتقليننا هم. قال لها روحوا ارجعوا على سوريا اشربوا مي، كان هيك يحكيها بهاي اللغة، يعني حكاها بالإنجليزي وقت، قال لها روحوا على سوريا اشربوا مي.
فوتونا على غرفة تقريبا 4 ب5 صغيرة وبيها تواليت مفتوح بابه ضمن الغرفة يعني. فلقينا قدامنا، نحن كنا هون صرنا شغلة 35 37 بين اللي يجونا 7 8 بعدين. فلقينا لقينا قدنا جوا بقلب الغرفة، ونصهم أفغان، وناس مصلخة وناس شالحة وناس لابسة وفي نسوان. فكنا بهاي الغرفة منظورين حصر ونشرب من مية التواليت.
وبيصغر مو؟
بأطفال صغار،
And there's children as well.
3 or 4 children.
As far as we were able to verify through testimonies out of the BVMN database, these are the locations frequently used for pushback operations. However, we are equally aware that there's more than meets the eye.
والله المركز هو يعني كان في مكان يعني ما مش مبين انه مش سكني، يعني مكان زي معزول، حاجة زي هيك يعني. أو كيف حتى انه احنا دخلنا لما وصل الباص نزلونا من الباص كانت في ساحة كبيرة قدام المركز. في قلب الساحة هذه في غرفة نظام سياج وأرضيتها بطون.
هو مثل ما فهمنا انه مستودع ذخيرة قديما.
The thing is, a lot of other hidden detention places, and I think they exist because of migrant testimonies, saying that they were taken to places that look like a stable, a warehouse, or even some kind of military facility.
Garages or some kind of like industrial buildings or abandoned buildings.
In essence, if you take people to a place that is off the radar, nobody will know they are there. The other significant is access to legal assistance, access to healthcare, conditions of detention that are unknown in such places. So there is a host of human rights issues raised.
Recently, the Council of Europe's Anti-Torture Committee, the CPT, visited Evros and again confirmed what we have been saying through our work, that several of these facilities are being used, are in fact designed to be used as places from which people vanish. Specifically about the detention center in Poros near Feres, which we have published extensively about. When they visited it, they found out that the logs that should have been kept for people that were being held there were all empty. So when somebody's taken there, they're not registered, and this is part of a strategy to make people disappear.
Within the same facility, Lena Karamanidou additionally identified a wide area of health risks, which are either caused or worsened by the form of imprisonment, the likes of which included malaria.
معقمات أو
لا لا لا لا لا لا لا ولا شيء.
70, 65, and we all sitting in small room, actually about 2 by 3 meter, and you know how it's look like when you have all that member in one room with all the the risk of the pandemic. They never care actually if you get sick, if you get ill. There was also some injured guy. They never give them any medical help. That we were begging because we have like kids inside for food, even for them water, but they don't care actually, and they keep threatening you with the button. If you don't shut up, I will come over there and beat you and all that stuff.
We've only seen pushbacks intensify, both in Evros and in the Aegean. Basically, the border is sealed for good now after COVID, and the pandemic is being used as an added excuse. So migrants are treated as a hygienic threat now, on top of everything else that they were facing before.
As far as I know, the conditions are far from being according to what the law states and according to the measures that should be taken in order to counter the pandemic. as for detention centers, what I see is prisoners and police officers without masks, while I have to wear a mask in my face, even outside of my house, if I go down to throw the garbage. So that is very problematic.
The basic dignity is completely disregarded. COVID regulations are completely disregarded. You usually have between 50 and 150 people gathered in one small room, where sometimes it's so crowded that they cannot even all sit at the same time. Some have to stand while others sit. And that sometimes lasts for several days. During this time, they never have access to food or water. They sometimes have access to toilet facilities, but that's like about half the cases. If they ask for food or water, they are either ignored or they are even teased. So there was this one testimony I took 2 weeks ago where the guy described to me that he asked an officer for water, who then put a bottle of water in front of him and said, if you dare to touch that, I will leave you with marks that you will never forget.
In addition, authorities take advantage of a specific feature of the terrain in order to obscure their conduct.
There's a military buffer zone that skirts the borderline. So civilians, NGO workers, human rights workers, and researchers such as ourselves are not allowed to access the border per se. So this creates an atmosphere of exception again, and impunity where human rights violations occur as routine.
And this is where a benevolent government or a benevolent authority or a benevolent Europe of nations in solidarity and in compliance with fundamental human rights would say we need to have some monitoring on what's going on there. But that's where you don't have it.
Known as the ZAP, or Zone Asphalaciens Procalypsis, the area reaches from the trilateral border in the north to the Aegean Sea in the south, and encompasses about 10,000 square kilometers, with a width varying from a few hundred meters to several kilometers along the river. It is this realm which casts a veil of secrecy that allows the perpetrators to avoid any form of accountability and provide for the Greek forces to corrupt additional military infrastructure for the purposes of pushbacks.
They mean it to just isolate you from the other side, from outside, to never let anyone watch what happened over there. So they just put you in that cell and you will never have access to anything. They will never bring you any paper to sign. You will even, you're right to understand what they were saying, because sometimes they were talking in Greek, and I don't know, but in my experience, I never, met any guy who can understand Greek, but they will never bring to you any translator that explain to you what they were saying. So you just have to be silent and never make a word. So that's how it's work over there.
حطونا بشي 40 شخص بالسيارة van.
And they put 40 person in the one van or a small van
for 3 hours.
يا محمد لم يركبونا بالفكسة يا يما، زخم ابني حطوه بالصدر الفان، من جد انفانات كبار عاد جابونا. يا خيي انا قالوا لي اركبي، انا قمت اترجاهم، يعني من وين تريد تاخذونا؟ انا تودي يرجعون يا ولم، بس اترجاهم واللي بكيت والله يبين علي بسلاح خوك، يبيبوا علي بسلاحك، يعني اركبي. انا قعدت بالقاع ما بدي اركب، ذاك شنطة ابني شعاطة مني فوتوا وركبوه حطوه بالاخر الفان. قام قام يهوب عليه ويزقح عليه يزمط عليه، وانا بقوم اركب جدا. خيي يكبسولك علي من هالخلق، كبس كبس كبس كبس، ايش بدي اقول لك؟ والناس كلها واقفه وقوف صفوه، هيك كبس كبس، يجي 30-40 واحد بالفان دخلوهم.
In each truck they put like around 14 to 15 person, because there were like too many cells in that detention. So they keep, put every group in one truck, and the truck that doesn't hold like 20 person in one truck, but they just put 15 and over more.
White vehicle, not a military license. A girl, she got like a panic attack or something. She can't breathe. When we look at her, she was like a dead person. She can't even move. The friends of the girl tried to help her, but the officer and the driver of the vehicle didn't do anything. She was a short, skinny girl, 25, 26, something like that, with yellow hair. I hope she's alive now. They took her with another vehicle. I don't know where they go exactly. I think they get her back to the military prison, maybe, I don't know. The driver of the vehicle and the officer were very scared. They looked at the gun and they were very scared. They were shaking. It could die between them, between their hands. That's why they've been scared.
اجت سيارة ثانية بالنص فيها 2-3 يونانيين، 3 يمكن يونانيين لابسين لباس جيش، في 4 مرتزقة مقنعين سوريين، لأنه واحد منهم يحكي عربي. ال3 ما حكوا ولا كلمة، واحد منهم يحكي عربي. انت من وين؟ من وين يقول؟
This ambiguity around pushbacks is only accentuated by the several military, paramilitary and police forces and agents that are involved in pushbacks. So you have uniformed police, you have army people and vehicles of the army often being present in pushbacks, but then you have masked men with unknown identities.
There have been instances where these people that are caught in these pushbacks, and before, when they're detained and then taken back to the river, there are these people on the riverside who tend to drive these small plastic dinghies across the river, and they don't necessarily cross all the way to the Turkish side, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they drop people in the middle of the river and ask them to swim, which obviously then has repercussions on the people that have been dropped into the water, because some people can't swim and the current's too strong and people just disappear.
لأنه آخر رحلة هاي اللي بدقق عليها، آخر رحلة بيجيبوها بالبلم، ما بيوصلون للنهار، بكبون بنص الماي وبيرجعوا. يعني هن بيعرف يسبح لحتى يطلع، ما بيعرف يسبح راحت عليه. يعني.
Third country nationals, they tend to be identified as wearing normally all black, balaclavas, Arabic, Syrian Arabic speaking or Farsi speaking, so Afghans or Syrians mostly. Not saying that they're the only ones, but I'm sure there are others, but these are the ones that we identify. And there are also instances of these people being dressed in sort of like partial military or police uniforms. So recently there were some with camouflage trousers and civilian t-shirt but black masks.
قام هذا العرس السوري يجي لابس موت عسكري، يرفع اجره هيك، احنا واقفين، ويضربها على نص اصابعنا، يضربنا هيك واحد ورا واحد.
The Greek authorities will offer people who they detain to get out of their detention, sort of like, if you work for us for about 6 months, then we'll give you a card or some sort of paper to allow you to stay in Greece.
هو قال أنا حابك تكون جزء من المهربين لأني بتحكي إنجليزي. أعطوني خيارين، إما السجن أو أشتغل معهم هذا الشغل.
And often some people obviously say yes, which I don't blame them for saying yes, obviously because they don't want to get pushed back and then have to try again and try again. But it's become much more of a common theme.
أنا سألته إذا ما بدي أشتغل شو رح يكون مصيري؟ قال لي حنضربك ونرجعك على تركيا، وإذا شفناك مرة تانية حنذبحك.
So basically, they take them out of their detention cell, like usually at night. They take them to the river bank and they let them attack, rob and push those other asylum seekers back to Turkey.
خلوني يصير عبد عندهم لحتى أشتغل بدالهم، لأنهن ما بيخاطروا بحياتهم بيشتغلوا هذا الشغل. فهاي الفترة بحياتي أنا بسميها مرحلة العبودية.
They do the, let's say, dirty job of the authorities in means of pushing people back to the riverbank on the other side.
There was a recent instance where there were 12 identified as third country nationals in a pushback where they actually inflicted beatings onto the refugees and people on the move.
يغربون السوريين مو اليونانيين، كانوا يغربون. قالوا انت كلمهم بالمصاري، يعني يقول احنا اولاد بلد، او انت عربي ما بعرف اذا سوري ولا غير سوري، نحن اولاد بلد، ليه عم تضربني اذا هن ما عم يضربوني؟ عليه قاموا التموا عليه الأربعة ونزلوه بالأرض وصاروا يضربوه بإجريهم.
بالبداية طلبوا مني ألبس القناع فلبسته. رفقاتي بالعبودية خبروني إنه إذا بدك تحمي حالك لازم تلبس القناع مشان ما حد يعرفك.
This practice is still going on, and currently I am investigating another case of 61 people.
We are now 61 people here, and we want Greece government to accept our refuge. Please don't push back us.
In this case, there is some footage, video, photos that the victims, like those 61 people, shared on that day together with the location information. So we can clearly see on those videos that a group of approximately like 15 people being brought to the location where 61 people gathered after they crossed the river from Turkey.
Şu anda Yunanistan'dayız ve yüzüm askeri insanlar geliyorlar. Uçakla saldırılıyor şu anda. Şu an bıçakla saldırılıyor.
We can also clearly see 3 white vehicles in the military zone. So, like those 15 people speaking like a Middle Eastern language, they cannot make it there by themselves. They are being brought. And based on my investigation, the same group was also used in another pushback incident months before that incident.
المهم صارت هون تقريبا وجه الصبح، يعني بالستة 5 هيك شيء. اجت سيارة فيها كمان واحد يوناني واثنين من هذول المرتزقة، نزلوا بلم نفخوه وشالونا على دفعتين. قبل ما يشيلونا على دفعتين قربونا على النهر، اليونانيين ما يسترجوا غربوا على النهر، هذول بس السوريين قربونا على النهر، فقاموا هون أخذوا منا المصاص العرب.
There has been one instance recently with a respondent I spoke to that the Greek authorities actually vocally said, does anyone speak English? Would anyone like to work for us for 6 months? And if you work for us for 6 months, then we will repay you with allowing you to stay in Greece for, I don't know, a short period of time, for about 6 months to a year or so.
There's an ecosystem of actors that participate in a pushback, and this only makes it harder to pinpoint accountability and responsibility for these cases.
Greek authorities, however, not only utilize the variety of actors present to their disguise, but in addition make use of alterations to the terrain in which they operate.
Processes that are understood as natural are indeed not natural at all. They are the part of a larger, slower engineering project which aspires to design the Evros River as an embankment. In fact, in Greek military imaginary, the Evros is often called as the Anachoma, as the last barrier of Europe and of Greece.
Within his thesis, Dr. Levidis elaborates this concept by presenting that the infrastructure created for flood prevention also serves a broader function of deterrence. Thus, embankments, floodplains, and dams are all instrumentalized to entrap border crossers in an environment which exposes them to the hostile elements of the frontier. The most dangerous transformations of the river are, however, provided by the Evros itself. Due to the strength of the river's current, which casts through the terrain with an annual average discharge of more than 103 cubic meters by the second, the line originally marking the border has shifted due to the morphology of the natural demarcation, which, as stated beforehand, has led to additional tension during 2020.
Back in spring last year, there were a few instances of the use of the islands in the Evros River, and then more recently, as of October, there were a string of cases, and now it's become a bit more of a trend that we identify through BVMN's testimonies. So, for example, there are little islets or islands that vary in size from like 100 meters to sort of 50 meters, sometimes slightly smaller, with trees and forest. And the Greek authorities will take people across on a boat to the island, and then they get kind of stuck in limbo land between the Greek side and then the Turkish side, and then often the Turkish authorities and the Greek authorities stand on each side and will not let people cross. And they're deterred because the water level's quite high or the current's quite strong. Some people can't swim, and sometimes they fire warning shots either into the water, both sides, or into the air to stop people from trying to cross.
From Turkey, not from Greece.
انتوا جايين من تركيا عادي.
لا بدنا نروح. احنا حكينا مع المنظمة GCR.
We talked with the human rights and GCR. They came.
I am telling you for last time. You must go back.
أنا عم بقول لك المرة الأخيرة روحوا ورجعوا.
These videos have been recorded by a group of refugees stranded on an islet next to the Greek village of Pifio. The group reportedly consisted of 94 people, including 30 minors, and additionally featured individuals in exceedingly vulnerable conditions, such as a young girl with visibly allergic reactions to her surroundings and an amputee with allegedly an inflamed ligament. On the 24th of May, the group reached out to the GCR and Human Rights 360, reporting their coordinates and the circumstances.
صرنا 10 أيام بين الجزيرين، بيناتنا 30 طفل، من بيناتهم هلا بس 10 صحيانين، كله رايح، كله خالص، لبكره رح يموتوا، ما رح يضل ولا طفل، لا شرب لا أكل، نسوان كلها قاعدة ما فينا تقوم، رجال ما فينا تساوي شيء، ما حدا عم يرد علينا، لا الكوموندوس، لا الأمم المتحدة، لا اليونان، لا الأوروبا، لا أي حدا. ردوا علينا كرمال الله، ردوا علينا كرمال الله، شوفوا حالة الأطفال، دنيا عم تشتي، دنيا مطر، كرمال الله ردوا علينا.
A few hours later, the European Court of Human Rights issued an interim decision under Rule 39, ordering Greek authorities to provide humanitarian assistance to the group on the island. Simultaneously, the NGOs also reached out to emergency services and the relevant authorities, providing them with the coordinates of the group, and later reached out again with the attachment of the ECTHR's ruling. According to the BVMN's report, on the 25th of May at 15:25 p.m. local time, 2 masked men from the Greek shores ordered the group to go back to Turkey.
I am telling you for last time, you must go back.
On the same evening, Spiegel journalist at the time, Yorgos Christidis, and Evseen published the video in question. Evseen additionally features a statement by which Greek authorities were allegedly unable to locate the group and cite a phone conversation between the GCR, Human Rights 360, and the Greek police, in which the latter states that as of late Wednesday afternoon, they were unable to find any people.
Sir. Do you speak English?
Do you speak English?
Can you speak English?
We called the GCR and the human rights. We are waiting for the police. Please, can you understand me?
Tell me again.
We called the GCR and the human rights. We are waiting for the police, and the European Court told the police to come here and help us. We are waiting. Please, can you understand me?
How many of you? How many people?
We are 94 people.
What?
About 100 people.
100.
Okay, 94. Exactly 94 people.
Where are you seeing all of them?
We are all from Syria.
All from Syria?
Yes.
All of us. There is a lot of children and women with us.
Just 4 days later, on the 31st of May, the GCR and Human Rights 360 reported another incident, this time of 52 people, which allegedly also included 27 members of the previous group that had been brought to the islet by Turkish officials. As a consequence, the European Court of Human Rights yet again issued a new decision on interim measures on the 1st of June and reminded the authorities that the lack of compliance likely results in a violation of Article 34 of the Convention. But despite the court's orders, The practice seemingly repeated itself, as the group stayed another 3 days on the island after the ruling was issued, until the 4th of June.
وصلنا 5 أيام لا هم خلينا نرجع ولا خلينا نروح، مش عارفين شو الحل.
والله صار 4 أيام ولا في شرب
كل شيء.
والله صار لنا أكثر من 4 أيام صار.
لا أكل لا شرب لا شيء يا شباب.
ما نطفى علينا رصاص.
ضرب علينا رصاص وما خلونا شلون تعبر.
ما بيخلونا نعبر والله العظيم قتلنا الجوع بقالنا 4 أيام.
حرمة حامل.
أنا بكري من ريف حلب، أخوه علاء الله يرحمه.
Alaa Muhammad al-Bakri has, according to the testimonies collected by the Watch the Med and Alarm Phone, entered Greece on the 25th of August 2021, which is also confirmed via the image Alaa has sent to his brother at the time of entry.
وصلوا الغابي على أخوي هوني مرض، ما عرفنا إيش السبب، يعني صار معه، يعني طبعا هو ما بدخن، يعني ما هو مدخن، لا بدخن ولا تعب. الآن تعب أخيه هوني، رفعاته تخلوا عنه، رفعاته 2 كانوا على اساس طلعوا معه انه نحن رايحين سوا وبنضل سوا، وهذا الان شافوا وقع تخلوا عنه، ضلوا ماشيين وعافوه بالغابي، ضل حاله.
According to his brother, Alaa spent the next 4 days in the forest until a separate group of border crossers found him at this location on the 30th of August. As of 9:14 a.m. of the same day, the group shared their coordinates and a picture of Alaa with Alarm Phone and Unified Rescue, which the latter also shared via their Facebook page. The location was also confirmed through text messages from the border crossers to Alaa's brother directly, who later also recognized the images when we showed it to him during our interview.
هي الصور، هي كان عند انقذوه، هي مشطح على الارض، كان بالصدفه في معن دكتور مصري، جربوه شو بس صحصح، هون حالته تعبانه كانت، على صحصح شوي، على شدناه على ظهرنا وطلعنا فيه، ما بنحسن نرجعه معنا.
قلنا له احنا نطلعه من الوادي وناخذه عزفة نسلمه منشان ياخذون اول شيء ياخذونه على مشفى او شيء.
According to the voice notes and text messages of the border crossers, the group proceeds to bring Alaa to the following location throughout the course of the day. By 3 p.m. local time, Alarm Phone has notified all relevant entities to provide assistance.
بعثوا لنا نداء للسلطات اليونانية أول ما ضل في الغابي، بس ما استجابوا يعني إلى منطقة أرينا في أحد الوديان اليونان في الطريق البري. تم إرسال بريد إلكتروني في الساعة 3 إلى السلطات اليونانية وما استجابوا.
The last known fact from this location is that Alaa has been picked up from here by a police vehicle on the same day.
وهناك اجت سيارة شرطة اخذته.
After Allah boards the police vehicle, nothing is verifiably known about his whereabouts for the period between the 30th of August to the 2nd of September.
وهاي المناطق اللي قدامهم يعني بالزفت لما تنزل أقرب منطقة عليه يعني إنه أتوقع إنه بيها شو اسمه بيها مقفر ويأخذون عليه هناك، أتوقع ماخذين على عريانة، لأنه المناطق اللي قدامهم نطلع عليها هاي كلها قرى صغيرة يعني ما يصير لي بيها لا مغافر ولا شيء، ما يصير بيها. ما أمر علي هناك، ما شفته إلا على النهر، حتى على السجن ما شفته هناك بالسجن لما أخذونا بيسجون جنب النهر، السجن الأزرق وسجن أبي يقولون هناك يعني ما شفته هناك يعني. حتى ما راحوا يقطعون النهر تيعطونا، تمام. جيت عند النهر هناك تيقطعونا، فلقيتهم عند النهر عند 6 بوابة أدم قدرنا لقيته.
During this time, it is more than likely that Allah has been pushed back to this islet, from where alarm phone receives an alert on the 2nd of September at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. By this time, a different group. On the same day, Unified Rescue releases the following video on their Facebook channel. Through the collected reports and interviews, we have been able to track Allah's entry, the worsening of his health condition in Greece, and ultimately his death on the islet. Later, through the help of Jasur and a cousin of Allah's in Turkey, the body has been successfully identified in the morgue in Edirne on the 8th of September and was buried the following day.
وبعد 6 شهور نحن يا اخيو بنبعث لكم التقرير بصلك على اسطنبول. قلنا له ما في مشكله. راحت هو 6 شهور، راحت هلا صار لها 2 سنين وما فعلوا، حتى راح هو حاول اخيو يجيب التقرير ما فعلوا يسلموه، ما اعطوه.
As pointed out by Dr. Levidis, the choice to dispose of humans in the middle of the flow is not just serving the claims of deniability, but additionally increases the potency of the medieval ideas of fortification, weaponizing the assets of the river to the functions of repair, and leaving people on the edge of bare life.
فنحن من ننزل نقوم نمشي، ففي ضياع يعني ضيعة نلاقي بيها الزيلات الأتراك والسيارات وعم يبرموا بالضياع، عم يلقطوا المهاجرين اللي عايجوا من اليونان وبيجمعوهم بمجمع مثل تحويشة. جمعونا لما صرنا بال200 شخص تقريبا هيك شيء. بعدين ضلينا هيك شيء 2 3 لما جمعوا الكل، عبونا بزيلات وأخذونا على النهر. فكان في صياد عنده زورق طويل حديد، كانه صياد يزت شبك بالنهر، فصار يحملونا كمان ويزتونا على الميل اليوناني، ولكن مو من نفس المكان، من غير مكان، هيك في مثل سمبوسكة ترابية بآخر النهر يزتونا عليها. ظلوا زتونا لما خلصوا جمعونا، صرنا كثير أشخاص، ضاغط فينا الدنيا، لا فينا نروح سباحة على تركيا، وإذا نروح على اليونان نهاجر ما عنا لا لبس ولا أكل ولا شرب، تمام، ولا تليفونات، وإذا نروح السلم حالنا بدنا ناكل قتل. فباركين وناطرين فرج الله. في ناس قالت إذا نروح على اليونان بدهم يقتلونا بعدين يدزونا على تركيا، قرروا إنه يروحوا سباحة. فشي 10-15 شخص قرروا يروحوا سباحة، راحوا سباحة بالاتجاه التركي مشان وين يجوا على بيوتهم، لأنه لا ظل عندهم لبس لا أكل لا شرب. 3 منهم قرقوا بالنهر وسحبوا من النهر، ما نعلم ماتوا طابوا عاشوا ما بعرف. بلشنا قوينا قلبنا نحن كمان شي 10 اشخاص 7، والله ما عاد اذكر بالضبط. فنحن رحنا ورا بعضنا ماشيين، عرفت شلون؟ فطلعنا على الطريق الترابي تبع اليونان ونصيح اي فريند ورافعين ايدينا، يعني انه جايين نسلمكم حالنا. فاجت اجى بيكام شافنا يعني، فنزل علينا وصار يضربنا وشطحنا بالارض، وفي جنبه قطعة مو قطعة مثل عناصر حدود، حرس حدودي، وكمان اجوا وقفونا. اجت سيارة دلمش بيضاء حملونا واخذونا على نفس السجن اللي كنا فيه قبل بيوم. وصلنا السجن، نزلنا من السيارة، فكان في 3 عناصر يونانيين جدا محترمين، عاملونا بطريقة كويسة، بس فتشونا تفتيش اذا شايلين سلاح او شايلين شيء، اعطونا مي، اعطونا بسكويت، تمام، فتحنا 5 دقائق برا، بعدين فوتونا على الغرفة نفسها اللي كنا فيها. بعدين فوتونا على الغرفة، وبعد شوي اجوا جماعة من اللي كانوا معنا، فقالوا لنا في الشاب اللي هذا ماسكينه لحاله بالقابة مفكرينه انه مهرب، فمكسرين ايديه وضاربينه، فقالوا اعطاكم عمره. رجعوا كمان لما صارت الدنيا ليل، بال8-9 بهالوقت طلعونا وقفونا برا بالساحة. فتفاجأنا بالموجود، أول واحد اللي كان موجود أول نهار الضابط كمان ماسك نفس البورية، فهو واقف عند باب السيارة، كل ما يطلع واحد يضربه، واللي يحاول انه يفلت او يزت حاله بسرعة ينزله يضل يضربه. فقمنا نقول لهذول ال3 اللي واقفين معه، نشر لهم بدينا انه بليز انه ما اعرف شنو، انه نترجاهم بمعنى. حملونا بسيارات واخذونا على النهر، بس على غير النقطة اللي زتونا منها قبل بيوم، نفس الطريقة نفس السيستم قبل بيوم. كمان هذول المقنعين فتشونا وطلعوا علينا وحكيوا علينا وهانونا وذلونا وزتونا على الميل التركي. بعدين الاتراك جمعونا كلياتنا شي ساعة وهم يجمعون فينا، وسووا نار للاطفال وللنسوان، على قولهم نار لانه الدنيا برد مشان يتدفوا، ومعاملة كويسة يعني. اذا صاروا زتونا مي مشان نشرب. فبعد شوي اجت زيلات صارت تشيلنا مجموعات وتزتنا قبل قدرنا ب1 كيلو، تقولنا هذيك قدرنا، روحوا وخذوا تكاسي روحوا على بيوتكم، بس ما تقولوا انه نحن اللي جبناكم اجيتوا لحالكم. يعني هن يعرفوا السيستم.
Our interviews already demonstrated the widespread nature of the practice. However, despite the unanimous results throughout different countries of origins, gender, age, physical attributes, or intention to register for asylum, there is another layer beyond the hindrances of new entries, namely the expulsion of those who have already arrived.
قدمنا لجوء واخذونا على فرجونا على ضيعة على سالزبورغ، ضيعة اسمها نويكيخن. ضلينا قاعدين فيها نتعلم لغة ونروح على المدرسة ونظامي. أخذت إقامتي ونزلت زيارة. كانت أختي بدها تطلع من تركيا على اليونان، نزلت زيارة على اليونان أنا عشان أشوف أختي بس. يعني تعرضت لمواقف، تشلحت الأوراق كلها، كل شيء معي تشلحته يعني. سرق الجواز وسرقت المصاري وكل شيء. رحت على البوليس على اليونان، رحت على البوليس أو يعني ما سمحوا إلي إنه أحكي. رحت بدي أشتكي أنا، ما سمحوا لي أحكي. ضربوني ونيموني ليلتين بالحبس، وبعدين ركبوني من النهر وقطعوني على تركيا.
تاريخ 20/11/2016 أخي كان طالع من تركيا على اليونان، فانفقد الاتصال بيني وبينه يعني، وظليت محاولة أسبوع إني أصل له ما كنت أوصل له. فقررت أنزل بتاريخ 27/11/2016. نزلت على اليونان. نزلت على قرية اسمها دوموكتيكو بين الحدود، صايرة على حدود تركيا يعني، بين اليونان وتركيا. رحت أبحث عن أخي، شلت صورة، كانت صورة معي على الهاتف إني أسأل عنه، إن الشخص هذا شفته أو أحد يعرف وين بالكراج. هو كراج باصات كنت أسأل عنه يعني. فجأة يطلع بوجه البوليس وقتها أخذوني يعني. ما فهموا شو قصتي ولا فهموا مني أي شيء يعني.
Fadi had reached Germany from Syria in 2015 and received refugee status. So that is a level of EU protection, a status of being lawfully present and given this advanced level of protection by the EU, just as a basis. And then had traveled to Greece lawfully in 2016 because his 11-year-old brother had gone missing en route to Greece. And his 11-year-old brother, Mohammed, had fled Syria because Daesh was recruiting boys his age, and their family made the, impossibly hard decision to send Mohammed to reach Fadi in Europe and to have Fadi live with him as his guardian. And that was really the only possibility of protection that the family could see.
ما بعرف يعني، ما عاد حسنت أواجه أحد من أهلي، أو يعني حتى أنا ما عاد أقدر أواجه حالي يعني، أصلا بين حالي ما عاد يعني. كان شيء صعب كتير، فما بعرف.
When he arrived and then went to Dimoktaiko and was in the bus station holding up pictures of his brother looking to see if anybody had seen him, he was stopped by police in what I believe is an instance of racial profiling, as he was the only person in this public space, stopped and questioned about his nationality. He was asked where he was from. And as soon as he said he was Syrian, the police immediately apprehended him, took his phone, put him in a van, and he was detained incommunicado for hours with no access to counsel, to the outside world in any way.
أخذوا مني كل شيء، أغرب هيك أي أشياء وحطوني بالسجن.
He was brought to a detention center in the forest where he was held with a group of, more people kept being brought in until it was about 50 people. So he was held in a cell with about 30 other men. And then there was a cell across the hallway with women and children. They were not given access to food, water, medicine, even the babies, and one toilet for the whole cell of 30 men. Just deplorable conditions that do not respect Greece's obligations under international law in any way. And then after about midnight, they were all loaded into one van and driven to the river and pushed back, 6 people at a time in a dinghy, to Turkey, and left on the Turkish riverbed with no direction.
This is based on a technique forensic architecture has developed before. We first used this technique to take interviews from inmates who had been kept at Sadnaya prison in Syria. So this was a prison that was off limits to journalists, and there were no images that existed of this prison. And moreover, people were being kept in the dark. So the people who were being held in that prison also didn't see the space in which they were kept. So we wanted to develop a technique to mitigate this lack of imaging, this particular visual regime, and we ended up with situated testimony, which is a process whereby with modeling with the witnesses, we reconstruct spaces and environments where violent events have taken place, and we amplify testimony and also help witnesses recall things that would otherwise be buried deep into the territory of trauma, of traumatic memory. We hoped that through this process we would be able to identify certain locations where pushbacks have happened through describing the vegetation or the topography of the area, and indeed it helped us locate some of these areas on the map.
They did not return his documents. They did not return his passport. And so that meant that when he was pushed back to Turkey, he was left without access to legal identity.
كمان راسلت السفارة كمان ما مشي حال.
They said things like to come back later, or they threw him for different loops, but they would not help him access his documents.
صرت محاول 6 مرات على اليونان وكل مرة بيكمشونا بيقتلوني.
And so he's left with no other options but the precarious route of the Evros back the other direction to try to enter Greece, or the sea route.
Left with no other option, he attempted to cross the Evros-Meric River to Greece 14 times, only to be pushed back every time.
بالتالي ما كان حدا يجي ياخذنا ولا منظمة تساعدنا وحتى الحكومة ما اجت. آخر شيء اجانا البوليس كمان قتلنا ورجعنا على تركيا.
Until finally on the 14th try, he was successfully able to re-enter Greece, at which point it still took him 2 more years until Germany reauthorized his paperwork, allowing him to return home.
Although home at last, Fadi still suffers from the consequences of his pushbacks.
While he was there, Fadi started to experience a chest pain that he'd never felt before, a severe chest pain, and he was hospitalized. And that hospitalization then turned later into emergency heart surgery and being provided a heart medication that he'll have to take for the rest of his life. And he had never had any heart trouble until this initial pushback happened, but it was so severe that it launched him into cardiac distress, essentially. In addition to that physical harm that was imposed, of course, the psychological harm is just beyond comprehension. And he is one of many, many people that have had to endure severe mental health challenges since their pushback.
Most of them have experienced that they try to cross the borders more than once. Many boys, after that experience, I would call it, of course, a traumatic experience. Many of them have still difficulties with sleep, or they have PTSD. I know a boy, when he sleeps for many days, he sees this kind of nightmares. And also he's very nervous or in some kind of situations. He has a lot of stress. So in this kind of situation, we are trying to provide further psychological help with an expert and maybe even a psychiatrist if it's needed. And many of the children, because of their traumatic experiences, they have sessions with a therapist.
More than half of the cases of pushbacks from Greece to Turkey include minors. And actually many times, not just teenagers, minors, but like really young children and even babies.
Right now the program has 40, I think.
Okay, and that is full capacity?
Yes.
تتذكر كم ايمت بالضبط حاولت على السفارة؟
بال 2018.
و3 سنوات ما ردوا عليك؟
ما عم يردوا، لا ما ردوا. حتى اقامتي هلا معها هسه يمكن 5-6 شهور لحتى تنتهي. هي 5 سنين اقامتي يعني جوازي.
تلاقي اي حدا باستراليا فيه يحكي لك مثلا مع منظمات هنيك، منظمات حقوقية فيهم يساعدوك؟
حكيت ما قالوا لي السفارة، كله بيقولوا له السفارة. يعني راجعوا البيت قالوا لهم السفارة. ما حدا بيفيدك على السفارة.
والسفارة ما عم ترد عليك؟
Yeah, no, he's gone.
And currently.
Yeah.
We was working from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 or 12 in the night, and the normal job from 8 to 7 o'clock. But the boss said to us, if you want to stay in this work, you will working to 11 or 12 o'clock. The work, it was very, very hard. Working about 14, 15 hours in the day. Then we worked in another place, same working. We worked about 2 months. But the boss said to us, I don't have money. If you want, go to police. Just like this. I don't have money, go to police. Said to us.
So he didn't pay you?
He didn't pay to us.
there's no helping from the authorities to us. The life here is very hard because if we are from Syria, we are Syrians, we couldn't work.
You could maybe argue that, like as many politicians on the right side especially do, that Turkey is a safe country. First of all, that is not true, because in Turkey there is absolutely no access to asylum as it is meant to be according to the Geneva Conventions, because Turkey did sign them, but with their geographical limitations. So that means that only refugees displaced by events in Europe can apply for asylum in Turkey. So everybody who is not coming from European countries cannot.
The limitations described are possible due to the stages by which the 1951 Convention and its 1967 Protocol were originally designed. This leads to cases where signed state parties ratified the Convention without its protocol, or for the case of Turkey, even maintaining these limitations despite accessing said protocol. The limitation presented results in an absence of vital legal protection for the people residing within the country. Thus, access to safe services, the right of education, healthcare coverage, or legal working conditions remain to be disregarded for millions of refugees and migrants. As a consequence, the practices of exploitation, child labor, and hazardous working conditions continue to be the norm.
Bunlara burada rahat yok. Bizim anamız, bacımız var. Bizim namusumuz var. Biz namusumuz için yaşıyoruz. Bunlar bizim namusumuza el attı, dil attı. Bunlar bu memleketten siktir olup gidecek. Bitti abi. Bunlar buradan gidecek.
Yüz adam kişi orada var yani. Biz nereye gideceğim o zaman?
And then, of course, there are reports of, and like increasing reports of thousands of Syrians being forcefully returned to Syria from Turkey.
Claiming that some areas held by the Turkish military were safe, Turkey started to deport Syrians back to the war-torn country forcefully.
Hem maddi anlamda hem sosyal anlamda sıkıştıran bir külfet olduğu açık. Bunu kimse inkar edemez. Orası temizlendikten sonra şimdi PDF'yi gönderiyoruz. 2023'ten sonra bunlar hiçbir şey kalmayacak.
Türkiye 3,5 milyonu Suriyeli olmak üzere yaklaşık 5 milyon yerlerinden edilmiş kişiye geçici ev sahipliği yapmaktadır. Tek başına bırakılmış olsak da Suriyeli kardeşlerimizin gönüllü ve onurlu geri dönüşleri için elimizden gelen gayreti gösteriyoruz.
İnsan Hakları İzleme Örgütü, Türkiye'den geri itilen ya da sınır dışı edilen Afganların durumuna ilişkin bir rapor hazırladı. Raporda mültecilere yönelik işkence ve kötü muamele iddiaları var.
Yani ölü ayakkabıyı diretiyoruz yani.
Abi senin normalde ne kadar alıyorsun öyle?
Bunlar 20 lira.
Valla. Şu yeri böyle şeyler
With the question of refuge and asylum becoming additionally far more political in later years, the motivation for harsher measures has increased dramatically, pushing some to rather unusual solutions.
Merhaba, kolay gelsin.
Merhaba, hoş geldiniz.
Sığınmacı göndermek için bilet almak istiyorum.
Kaç sığınmacı göndermek istiyorsunuz?
3.
Tamam.
Bize ırkçı diyenlere de buradan cevap veriyoruz. Hayır, biz ırkçı değil, biz vatanseveriz. Biz Atatürk çizgisinde Türk milliyetçisiyiz. Ama siz vatanınızı korumayı beceremeyen salaklarsınız.
Biz tüm sığınmacı ve kaçakları bir yıl içinde ülkelerine göndereceğiz. Vatanını seven ve sahiplenen Türk evlatları. Siz Zafer Partisi'ne destek olun, ülkemizi hep birlikte kurtaralım.
Güle güle sana, yolun şamasın. Güle güle sana, vatan Türkiye kalsın. Güle güle sana.
İlan ediyorum. Ben iktidara gelir gelmez tüm mültecileri evlerine göndereceğim. Nokta.
Siz nasıl göndereceksiniz?
Biz gerekirse zorla göndereceğiz.
Suriyeliler gidecek be oğlum. Gidecek. Gidecek.
Ama hukuk içinde zorla. Yani Stalin
Afganistan'dan geliyor, Afrika'dan geliyor, Suriye'den geliyor, Irak'tan geliyor. Bitti kardeşim ya. Bizim evlatlarımız işsiz.
Türkiye'yi Suriyeli doldurdular. Bütün Suriyeliler gidecek. 2 yıl içinde tamamı gidecek.
3.600.000 Suriyelinin bizim ülkemizde ne işi var? Bizim çocuklarımız iş bulamıyor.
eğer siz bir ülke sahibiyseniz ülkenizi korumak için canınızı da vereceksiniz. Nasıl Türk askeri Suriye'de Elbap'ta canını veriyorsa Suriyeli Tosun gelip sahilde nargile içmeyecek.
10 milyon tane affedersiniz insan olmayan yaratık var. Araplar, Afganlar, Pakistanlılar bunlara insan diyemeyiz. Bunlar kesinlikle insan değil.
Turkish politician asylum seekers. We fled persecution back in Turkey and crossed Evros in May 4 and 5 a.m. We are hiding near Neovisa in fear of pushback.
One of the most important protections granted by the 1951 Convention and the 1967 Protocol is the principle of non-refoulement. This states that under international human rights law, the principle of non-refoulement guarantees that no one should be returned to a country where they will face torture, cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment and other irreparable harm. Furthermore, this principle applies to all migrants at all times, irrespective of migration status.
We are urged United Nations and Greek authorities to protect us from being pushed back.
Ayşe Erdogan was one of the first cases that we looked into. Ayşe is currently in prison as a result of her pushback, so we have a clear case of refoulement here. She is somebody who was being persecuted in Turkey. She fled Turkey along with two friends, Kamil Yildirim and Talip Niksar. They crossed into Greece. They filmed a video, an appeal video, appealing to the international authorities to help them not be pushed back. This video was published on Twitter by a journalist called Zubair Koçulu.
A young man called Ihsan reached out to me through my Twitter, saying that his twin sister and two other asylum seekers from Turkey crossed the Evros River, making it to Greece, to the EU soil, and they were in fear of pushback.
And despite this public appeal, they were arrested in the village of Neovisa after they had taken photos in the village. So we were able to geolocate them, to locate them inside Greek territory on the 5th of May 2019. And from there they were taken to Neochimonio police station, Neochimonio border guard station, a station in the region, a few kilometers south of the town of Oristiada. And from there they were secretly pushed back to Turkey.
The next day, Ihsan told me that Ayşe Erdogan was arrested in Turkey by the Turkish authorities. It was a big shock to the family, as they had thought Ayşe was finally safe in the European Union and she wouldn't be returned, as she was facing persecution back in her home country based on political charges.
Her brother, who was following their footsteps from Athens, he had arrived a few months earlier, he went to Chimonio police station while his sister was inside, and he was told that they have nobody there under that name and that his sister is not being held there. So this again is a clear-cut case of refoulement, of a pushback, which resulted to Ayşe spending a significant amount of time in a very dangerous prison in Gebze in Turkey.
Ayşe was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months, which she is now serving at Gebze High Security Female Prison near Istanbul.
Local human rights groups and lawyers represented Ayşe in a Greek court, presenting evidence, concrete evidence, proving that she was actually in Greece before she was sent back to Turkey. But the Greek court didn't find Greece responsible, stating that they couldn't document Ayşe's presence in the country.
This case was dismissed by the public prosecutor. Upon our appeal against this action of the prosecutor to stop the investigation, the file reopened, so new testimonies were given, new evidence was provided. Still, the prosecutor did not press charges, so we don't have any actual trials, public hearings taking place.
They mainly escaped the authoritarian Erdogan government's mass crackdown that has been going on for several years now. They don't feel safe and secure given that there is no rule of law in the country and Turkey persecutes dissidents on politically motivated, arbitrary, and vague charges. In most cases, so many people were arrested in Turkey after Greece pushed them back, and they spent years in jail. Sending them back to Turkey from the EU means that this persecution will go on for them.
UNHCR remains concerned about the increased reports of alleged informal returns to Turkey of persons who, according to their own attestations, had reached Greek soil or territorial waters. Many of these reports are deemed credible on the basis of quantity and quality of the provided data. Allegations have also been brought to UNHCR's attention of individuals or whole groups that have been forcibly returned from Greece to Turkey via sea or land borders at great risk to their lives. We have also been aware of reports of alleged informal summary expulsions from Greece's mainland. These concern cases of asylum seekers being removed even from distant cities, or persons taken from reception and identification facilities on the mainland and then brought back to the borders. Many of these persons reported violent treatment, beatings, and theft of their personal belongings before their removal. UNHCR have officially raised such reports with the competent authorities in anticipation of proper investigation. We have also called for preventive measures against such practices, including clear rules at the borders, independent monitoring mechanisms, capacity building to the newly recruited staff, police officers at the borders, and also thorough investigation of such incidents.
Once again, is this being executed though? Are measures being taken case? Are currently actions being launched against the Greek police or military who has been alleged to illegally push back these refugees? And also, is the investigation thoroughly thorough?
This is something we're asking and continue to ask for a thorough and proper investigation of such incidents.
In your experiences, once again, how cooperative has the Greek government been in following through on these proceedings?
We have raised such reports with the competent authorities. For the moment, as far as I know, there are still investigations ongoing, but as far as I know, I don't know if there is an official report on that issue.
For one to start talking about the procedures that follow, accusations or allegations that a pushback took place, one needs to focus down a little bit on accountability and what accountability means or non-accountability means for the Greek security forces. Basically, one of the open wounds, let's say, of the judicial and procedural problem that we have here in the country is that the first line of investigation always happens internally. So basically, if the police or the Coast Guard or any other security forces personnel commits or is allegedly committing a violation, their own superiors, their own rank officers will be the first ones to decide whether this is happening or not. And I'm saying this because this has been a pattern that we see when it comes to police violence in the city, but also when it comes to pushbacks in the border areas. So we see a complete disregard of an actual procedure, we see a complete lack of an actual procedure.
Out of those cases that provide you with the needed evidence and the material and also the willing named testimonies, How many of those cases get then actually being to end with a conviction after trial?
We don't have any conviction because we don't have any trials yet. Okay, that is very important to understand that although there are cases which have a good ground for them to lead to a proven testimony, they usually are not dealt with as they should be dealt with.
Pushbacks have been reported for several years, but because of this particular ecology of exception and this visual regime, this obscure visual regime, there are very little pieces of visual evidence to prove this.
The fact that anybody that's pushed back, the first thing basically that happens is your phone is taken, broken. And so that makes it much harder to support your case than you could if you had geolocation, if you had photos, videos, etc.
It's very difficult to bring a case forward when the victim is in another country and where there is no single track of an arrest, of an apprehension, of detention, or of the return itself. On the other hand, not having been registered as someone that successfully crossed inside the country, that also gives you almost an easy way, and in huge quotation marks, it's not easy in any way, but I'm speaking procedurally, to say that there is no local measures, domestic measures to seek justice through. Because the Greek state in this case, but also any other state that's performing pushbacks, does not have a single piece of evidence to be able to trace back on.
Fadi could not access any domestic remedies for what happened to him in Greece. And so Human Rights 360 as a local Greek NGO connected him to GLAAD to then pursue accountability outside Greece at the international level. And it seemed like a good fit for bringing to the Human Rights Committee, as there were myriad human rights abuses under the ICCPR. We alleged handfuls of ways in which Greece had violated different articles of the ICCPR. We filed the complaint with the Human Rights Committee in November of 2020, and we're still waiting to hear back from them. There is a growing movement, I would say, in this field away from the European Court of Human Rights, the Strasbourg Court, in seeing some of their recent takes on pushbacks. There is not as much hope as there once was for the European Court as a mechanism for protecting human rights in the context of pushbacks specifically.
On the 13th of February 2020, the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights rendered their long-awaited judgment in the case of ND and NT versus Spain.
And that decision was rolled out by the Grand Chamber in February of this year. And it overturned a prior favorable decision that had been released in 2017. And when they basically took back what that original chamber decision had said in 2017, the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights not only dialed back the human rights violations that they had said had occurred by Spain against the two claimants who were basically pushed back to Morocco from a Spanish enclave, but they also introduced something called the own culpable conduct test. If you enter in a way that is not authorized, then you basically give up your rights to protection from summary and collective expulsions. So basically, if you don't go through the hoops that they say are feasible legal ways of entry, then you can just be returned. And not only is that a very, I would say, misguided interpretation of the law, but it also neglects the reality on the ground that for people like ND and NT, there weren't actual accessible legal avenues that they could have taken to enter Spain. Unfortunately, Fadi's case is not an isolated example of the types of abuses that Greece does. And to us, to my team, it was both emblematic and an aggravated example of what Greece does in Evros. So we hope that there is, potential for some form of accountability through this human rights complaint, that potentially Greece may reimburse him monetarily for what he's undergone, but moreover, that Greece will have to investigate all of these claims that have been brought against them.
In the meanwhile, when investigations do happen, they rarely take on the direction expected.
How can one start talking about the NTA? How can one begin to grasp how the NTA became the investigative agency or authority of sorts for pushbacks in Greece? How a semi-independent authority became this washing machine, if I may say, for the pushback allegations. Basically, the agency, which has a totally different mandate, has no reason whatsoever in any way under its mandate to investigate pushbacks.
The National Transparency Authority was founded in 2019 by the merger of 5 audit bodies with the goal to initially monitor corruption cases. However, following the international backlash over pushback allegations, the authority took on a new role within its functions, which includes, for example, a 193-page investigation scrutinizing the work of lighthouse reports.
The National Transparency Authority made this report, which was to try not to investigate, in my opinion, whether pushbacks happened or not, but whether we, and that this we includes the consortium of reporters, open source experts and others that was coordinated by Lighthouse Reports, whether what we published was true and whether we are truthful in what we say, rather than whether the events we describe are actually true and whether they happened. In order to do that, they tried to scrutinize the audiovisual material that we shared with them and that was already either way made public from public sources. Interestingly enough, they gave this footage to be corroborated by the Greek police, thus effectively cancelling their own independence by saying, like, okay, the Greek police and the Greek Coast Guard are accused of doing certain things, and they sent them the material to scrutinize. The other thing that was really interesting was the choice of people they made as to who they would interview. So it ended up being like an exit poll or a filling of, and the questions were more relevant to how people would feel about Greece potentially securing its border, or how do people in the border areas feel about like whether Greece is doing enough to secure its borders, whether Greece is actually doing enough to prevent migration, whether Greece is doing enough to not allow people to enter. The other not surprising thing is the outcome of this investigation, which basically said, these things didn't happen.
The NTA initially published its report in May 2022, together with its methodology in the annex that listed the anonymized accounts of the questioned individuals. Thus, the authority reacted by abruptly deleting the report after discovering the issue, only to realize that the link on the platform still works.
Allegations affecting Greece are clearly unfounded, rely on footage or testimonials provided from the country of departure. Numerous cases have been investigated, including by the European Union, and reports have found no evidence of any breach of EU fundamental rights.
In Evros, this is a standard response of the Greek government.
At least since last March, the xenophobic instincts of society have been, in a way, cultivated by also institutional anomalies and institutional and anomalous practices from the Greek government regarding refugees and asylum seekers. And of course, in many occasions, the NGOs are targeted even by the government.
This was also the response following the publication of the work that we did on the March shootings, both Mohammed Al-Arab's and Mohammed Gluzar's shooting.
And we have seen announcements regarding some alarming situations in the Greek islands where the government advised refugees not to trust NGOs and trust only the government, for NGOs are lying to them and want to exploit them.
On the Greek side, it's almost impossible for NGOs to be active in the area, which is why we also take most of the testimonies when the people will return to Turkey, and then we can meet them here and have them talk to us.
The targeting is mainly consisting of an accusation of being against Greece. The government has assumed its own responsibility to represent Greece in all matters. Then by government we mean specifically this administration. So this administration doesn't want anyone to speak ill of Greece in any way because they assume it as a personal attack. And if in all fairness one could say that New Democracy is not to be the only one blamed for the practices that Greece is doing, New Democracy is actually perceiving it as such. Everything is an attack towards New Democracy, and thus everything is perceived as an attack against the state, and even more, as an attack against what Greece is deeply.
There have been people asking for forensic architecture to be investigated by the authorities, specifically an MP of the ruling party, a couple of days after the Libe committee in the European Parliament held a hearing on the shooting events of March. He went live on Parliament and said that forensic architecture, along with a series of other organizations, should be investigated for their role, implying that we also collaborate with the Turkish authorities, spread Turkish propaganda with smugglers and so on.
Ζήτημα κανόνων και μάλιστα υπερεπίγων είναι η τάχιστη ολοκλήρωση των διαδικασιών εξέτασης αίτησης ασύλου των μεταναστών που βρίσκονται ήδη στη χώρα και η επαναπροώθηση των μη ασυλούχων στην Τουρκία ή στις χώρες προέλευσής τους. Ζήτημα κανόνων, προσοχή, εδώ είναι η λογοδοσία που γνωρίζω, κύριε Υπουργέ, ότι προχωρά γοργά, των μη κυβερνητικών οργανώσεων που οργίασαν την περίοδο 15-19, αλλά και ο έλεγχος από τη δικαιοσύνη εκείνων όπως η Aegean Boat Report, η Consolidated Rescue Group, η Forensic Architecture ή η Lighthouse Relief, που τι κάνουν, δίνουν τα στίγματα του λιμενικού σώματος και του πολεμικού ναυτικού αναπαράγοντας υλικό από τουρκικά UAV, θέτοντας σε κίνδυνο τους ήρωές μας, τα στελέχη που φυλάτουν τις σύγχρονες θερμοπύλες της Δύσης, διότι περί αυτού πρόκειται.
This is a typical response that when uncomfortable truths surface, these are planted by the Turkish authorities and they further the work of smugglers.
This is indeed very alarming, as the Greek state, in spite of stopping a problematic policy, which has criminal aspects as well, criminal law aspects as well, it does the exactly opposite thing and prosecutes the people who express their solidarity.
Let me be very clear here. If you are an NGO, a humanitarian worker coming to Greece to help people, you're extremely welcome. We work with tens and hundreds of NGOs in a lot of the camps. They're residents, they're helping people.
To accuse these people of espionage, Minister, seems absurd.
Listen, if you find somebody at the borders with illegal radio equipment in frequencies which are military frequencies.
They're trying to save lives, Minister. These people are trying to save lives.
No, they're not trying to save lives. They're trying to ensure that smugglers send people through. They're part of some of them could be part of a network, and it's up to the police and the court to determine who is helping people and who is smuggling people. And calling yourself an NGO, it could mean many different things. It could mean all these well-known organizations that we respect their work so much and we work with them. And it can mean 3 people that have formed a small NGO and they have colleagues on the opposite side that send boat every day, and they coordinate from the Greek side to tell them where the Coast Guard boat is. When the Coast Guard vessel pulls, then they call and say, okay, come, start now. This is called smuggling. Not in Greece, in every European country or every Western country. This is a critical difference, and thanks God, our courts are extremely competent, they're fully independent, and they take judgments on a case-by-case basis.
Basically, we started reporting about pushbacks in April 2020. And then afterwards, after half a year, we figured out that from May on, the Greek Secret Service had been surveilling us and 3 other NGOs. And then in September concluded their investigation into us. And basically, this was a criminal investigation into Chaussure and 3 other NGOs. And we are accused of forming and joining a criminal organization, violating state secrets, espionage, and facilitation of illegal entry, so smuggling but without profit. And so these 4 accusations have been brought to the public prosecutor in September by the Greek Secret Service, Police and Coast Guard. And the thing is that until now, we have not been contacted by the Greek authorities. It was just used in a defamation campaign in the media. And so basically, we are kind of waiting for news.
We have been at odds with the Greek state and with the vast majority of even civil society organizations, intellectuals, etc., from day one.
Panayiotis Dimitras founded the Greek Helsinki Monitor back in '93 and has been a thorn in the authorities' eyes ever since.
First of all, I started by being an agent of the Pope because I was helping the Catholics, and an agent of the Jews because I fought anti-Semitism. And then, of course, agent of Soros and the Macedonians because I was working about them.
Together with many others, Mr. Dimitras has since been promoted to Turkish agent and faces charges of smuggling alongside the founder of Aegean Boat Report, Tommy Olsen, for providing assistance to the new arrivals on the island of Kos.
The whole procedure, by the way, is totally phony, because I have a case file, and it breaks every single Greek law, let alone international law, about procedural things. I mean, the accusations against me and him are based on a statement by a foreigner who arrived on the island, whom we never talked to, never met, but actually the Coast Guard put on his statement who was his translator, another Coast Guard officer, you can imagine. All the information they wanted to implicate us, but that was not even enough. Then they took out the phone of one guy and the WhatsApp. They cut out the initial discussion that we were communicating with him to register the previous pushback, and they pretended to communicate with him only when he was about to arrive to Kos to assist him. So they did all those crazy things which no decent court will ever uphold, but of course you don't know about courts in Greece and what will happen. By the way, I had never been to Kos until I had to go to make a defense statement. You can imagine that our criminal organization was magic, you know, in the air. I've never met Tommy Olsen in my life. I never met any of the my co-accused asylum seekers. They have never met Olsen or me, and they have only met among themselves. It's a smear campaign, that's all.
A smear campaign that is not without precedent.
There is the most famous case, the Human Rights Watch made a report about the border in Evros, with plenty of material, and we submitted to the prosecutor in Evros. And he filed it away because he said, anyway, the sources are not credible because they come from a Turkish state. The Human Rights Watch report was a Turkish state. And they can write those things, the prosecutors. There's no one ever punishes prosecutors or judges unless they do some corruption kind of things, or they never take judgments after 10 years. But when they do those kind of things, they get promotions. So here you are.
The Greek authorities are facing a very difficult task in containing the situation, and I want to thank the Greek border guards and the coast guards. I want to thank the civilians, the police, the servicemen and servicewomen, and I want to thank Frontex for their tireless effort.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the reality of our work in Greece, we are implementing the biggest operations we have. So we have usually between 600 and 800 staff, border guards and coast guard officers deployed in Greece. The mission is to contribute to the border surveillance at sea, at land. It's to intercept irregular crossings, to detect, to intercept. When there are cases of search and rescue, then we have to support, because this is the role in the context of the Coast Guard. But of course, we are also a law enforcement actor, and we have to contribute to the fight against criminal activities, including the threat of terrorism. So basically, what we are doing in Greece is border surveillance, border checks, security screening, debriefing of migrants, returns, readmission to Turkey when Turkey is willing, if Turkey is willing to implement again the EU-Turkey deal.
In the beginning, we were really not sure about the level of Frontex involvement or about its involvement at all. That was back in 2016, 2017.
Very good. لاحتهم عيونهم ملونين وعم يحكوا انجليزي. Then they asked who speak English, who speak Dutch.
يونان، بس في كان فيهم ألمان بس ما حكوا معي. أنا اللي ضربني يوناني، عم يحكي يوناني، ما فهمت عليه.
One of the officer was talking Germany, and the other one was talking to our friend because he was in Italy before, and he was talking to him in Italy, and he said our friend did tell us, explain to us that later he was in Spain, that he lived in Italy, and now he came to work in here in Greece border to protect her like he did tell her.
في كانوا هنا ألمان كانوا واقفين اثنين يحكوا.
As time goes by and as Frontex's presence has become even greater in both in the Evros region and the Aegean Islands, we have become pretty sure that at least they know.
Sometimes in testimonies of people who were pushed back, there are references to officers speaking German or speaking other languages as well that correspond to teams that have been deployed in the area.
Very recently, the executive director of Frontex, Leggeri, confirmed that only Frontex keeps forces in the region. non-Greek speaking forces in the region. So anybody who doesn't speak Greek and is part of border guard or a patrol operation in the region would have to belong to Frontex. And we know that Frontex has German and Austrian border guards within their ranks in Evros. So it's only logical to assume that these people could have been members of Frontex.
We have several testimonies that where the respondents were able to describe clearly the uniforms of Frontex officers and the official uniforms with the blue Frontex armbands, apprehending them, beating them, and then handing them over to masked men. Those masked men with the balaclavas and dressed in black without official insignia, who then continued the whole pushback chain. And in some of those testimonies, the respondents were actually fluent in German, so they could not only tell us it was German that was being spoken, but they could also tell us clearly what was being spoken and that it was the native speakers who were speaking German. We do not have any evidence that Frontex officers in official uniforms were actually conducting the pushback at the river, but there is clear evidence that Frontex is part of this whole pushback chain. And there is strong reason to believe that Frontex officers are present during pushbacks at the river, but not in their official uniforms.
We're not arguing that Frontex was actively participating in Fadi's pushback. We cannot prove that at this stage.
Okay. However, if I'm not pushing you in terms of making a personal statement on that, the masked black uniform wearing technically civilians, but they're German-speaking people that you described, and the reasoning that you gave behind it does, implicate from a deductive standpoint that there could not be another possibility by also following Legari's.
I think that's a logical argument to make.
Following the information gathered, we reached out to Frontex for commentary, asking to what extent Frontex officers would be involved and/or aware of the actions of their Greek counterparts and their activities which end in collective expulsions. To which Frontex responded that the agency is fully committed to upholding the highest standards of border control within their operations, and that fundamental rights, including the respect for the principle of non-refoulement, are at the core of all the agency's activities.
Since they are aware of the gross human rights violations that take place, they are legally obliged to address the matter to the EU and the Greek state. So in that matter, we can be sure that they are accomplices by their silencing.
Frontex claims that they haven't witnessed any pushbacks, but how can that be true when we have thousands and thousands of testimonies of pushbacks happening and we know that Frontex is present in that area? That's just a disconnect that can't happen.
Frontex has denied that it participates in border surveillance operations within the military area. They said that the Greek government did not include Frontex officers deployed in Evros in such operations, so they were mainly working on the checks along the main roads. So that had quite significant implications in terms of responsibility, because if they were not involved in surveillance operations patrolling along the river, so that means they could not be argued to be involved in pushbacks.
We know that they know enough what they're doing and what they're being complicit in. It's only a matter of whether there is going to be a decision not to be that directly involved. I don't think there is any way for two security forces to be in the same space without being complicit to each other's actions, whichever these actions might be, whether they are good or bad actions.
However, even if we would follow the initial narrative, numerous questions arise out of the disclosed status quo.
I visited Evros and I had quite a long talk with the Frontex members there. It was last summer, a year ago, and I also asked them, where exactly are you in Evros region? You know, where are you acting? And it appeared to me that they are mainly acting not really at the front, but more backwards. And I asked them, but if you hear anything what happened, because I was there just a month after, this story of the Syrian family on the islets and the Maria case. Yeah.
We are here on this island with all this person who the police deny us and the Greek army deny us.
Baida Al-Salah is 27 years old. She has the only phone among this group of 39 people. On Friday, she sent us this video and her location. For weeks, Greek authorities maintained first that they couldn't find the group, then that they were on Turkish territory and were not able to mount a rescue mission. They told us that 2 other members of the group drowned when the Greek authorities pushed them back onto the islet, infested with scorpions and snakes.
And I said, but if you hear these kinds of stories, are you able to go there? And are you able to also observe if more of these practices are happening? And they say, no. I mean, we can only go there where operational needs are. And the Greek border guards decide where the operational needs are. And I also said to them, look, but you have more responsibilities. Your task is not only assisting border control, but also assisting fundamental rights compliance. How can you make that true if you let yourself being limited? And he said, look, this is the regulation and we are under the command of the border guards.
I'll mention very specifically a letter sent to Josur, which stated, in the case of some people being stranded on an island on the river for several days, that the Frontex teams were 32 kilometers away from the location and they were deployed elsewhere. And when I read this, I was like, there are more than one teams. They are stationed in different towns. So were they all 32 kilometers away? Exactly 32 kilometers away from the location of the incident? I don't know.
Welcome you today to Athens, and an opportunity for me to thank you personally for the excellent cooperation we've had over the past years when it comes to protecting our borders, which is both a sovereign right and an obligation fully compatible with international law.
When asked about the operational area in the field, Frontex maintained its official position on the matter. However, when we required information about the Fundamental Rights Monitor's access to the ZAP, the agency responded that the Fundamental Rights Monitors have not requested access to that area.
This is a kind of nice cat and mouse play, that Greece can just design military zones and then say for security reasons we cannot allow Frontex to go there, and that gives them carte blanche to do whatever they want in that military zone.
Still having questions about Frontex's position in Evros, we asked about other areas of employment. As such, we required about the officer's presence in police and border guard stations where alleged human rights violations have occurred in the past. To which the agency responded that due to the sensitive nature of the question, this information cannot be disclosed. However, in regards to the Fundamental Rights Monitor's access to the same facilities, the issued answer stated that there were no visits to those border police stations, and access was not requested. We then continued to ask of the Fundamental Rights Monitor's awareness of informal detention sites such as Poros. We asked the same question a second time in regards to the Standing Corps awarenesses about informal detention sites. Frontex's remarks of a similar facility can be noted in Serious Incident Report 1475-6 of 2022, which yet again raises concerns about Greek authorities' conduct and the use of a mysterious facility. The letter also caught the attention of Lena Karamanidou.
There is no policy to directly or indirectly contribute or carry out violation of fundamental rights. We have a policy of fundamental rights within the agency. We are committed to that.
When I did the inquiry for the Parliament, we also got in touch with whistleblowers who also told us when they came there for debriefings on the islands, and that at the moment that they arrived in Greece, their coordinator said, look, you're not going to have any task during the next 3 months because no one arrives at the islands. Just sit down and relax because there's no work for you. So they were very much aware of the pushbacks, but they were simply left elsewhere.
Despite having clear obligations enshrined in its regulations, as well as within multiple sections detailing the agency's tasks, Frontex has found itself facing numerous investigations, including, among others, the European Ombudsman, the European Parliament, as well as the European Anti-Fraud Agency, OLAF. In particular, the OLAF report highlighted a number of instances in which the agency's actions were more than questionable, including instances of deliberately withholding information from the fundamental rights officer. Alleging NGOs of siding with Turkey. not reporting fundamental rights violations in order to keep good relations with the Greek authorities. And a very questionable view of fundamental rights within the core of the agency's activities.
Our new mandate and resources are a clear and strong political response to the migration and security crisis faced by the European Union. This significantly expanded mandate and resources bring even more scrutiny of the agency, along with greater accountability. The agency is now more operational than ever. We have more officers, more equipment, and can react faster to crises at EU's borders.
The current framework is insufficient in terms of its arrangements to address all the human rights issues that occur through its expanded mandate. There are several mechanisms that have been established over the years. For example, the Serious Incident Reporting System, which is used for monitoring human rights violations at the borders. We have the Fundamental Rights Officer, Consultative Forum, and the complaints mechanism, which was introduced in 2016, so that people affected by Frontex operations, whose human rights have been affected by Frontex operations, can submit complaints.
These measures are additionally complemented by the addition of the previously mentioned fundamental rights monitors who report to the FRO. Having said that, there are multiple issues within each of these avenues.
For example, the Serious Incident Report System had very serious shortcomings. Not enough serious incident reports were submitted. Other reports submitted regarding possible fundamental rights operations were submitted not in category 4, which is specifically about this kind of incident, but category 2.
Even when substantial reports are filed, as within the Maria case, the SIR confirms within its conclusions concerns about the inaction, multiple issues highlighted so far, and deems the allegation of the pushbacks credible by its own assessment.
All these issues were known within Frontex because they were raised by the Fundamental Rights Officer and Consultative Forum, but nothing happened.
If you believe your rights have been violated by someone involved in any Frontex activity, Frontex has a tool for you.
In terms, for example, the complaints mechanism, which is one of the key ones in terms of addressing fundamental rights violations, I think around 2/3 of the complaints are not admissible. And there are cases, for example, Evros, no complaint has been ever submitted, and the report by the Fundamental Rights Officer after her visit in 2019 raised some very serious concerns about the lack of availability of complaints forms and information about complaints in border guard stations and police stations in the area. Only a person directly affected can submit a complaint, and the complaint cannot be anonymous, make it difficult in practice because people might be afraid of submitting a complaint because they think that it might have an impact on their asylum application or the authorities taking action against them. So there are issues with how these mechanisms have been established within the legal framework, and there are issues of implementation as well. In my opinion, all these mechanisms and talk about human rights and stressing repeatedly compliance with human rights, they're all a fig leaf. More broadly speaking, within the general policy, migration policy of the European Union, with its focus on controlling the external border and not letting people enter EU territory, it is impossible not to have fundamental rights violations. It's a violent border policy where violence and violations of rights are part of it. They are inevitable. They are not an aberration. They are not something that occasionally happens that is against the rules. They are part of the policy.
The head of the EU's border agency, Fabrice Leggeri, confirmed he's stepping down on Friday following reports of misconduct and human rights violations.
I would like to reiterate once more is Frontex's critically important task, which is to help member states to protect the common EU external borders and to uphold at the same time the fundamental rights in doing so.
But it would be ignoring the elephant in the room if I didn't mention that because what was happening to the agency's staff is fine. It's not. Many of people are traumatized. Many are anxious what is happening to them. Many don't want to work in Frontex as it was. And being absolutely honest to this House, some refuse to come to the agency because of its reputation. So we have work to do.
But I would be happy to reiterate once again, in particular, two main points. One, the first one on Frontex, which fulfills a critical important task to support member states in managing the EU external borders. And the second point is that this needs to happen, the protection of the EU's external border, in complete respect for fundamental rights.
Our operations are conducted with the utmost respect for fundamental rights, ensuring that those in need of protection receive it. We work tirelessly to prevent the loss of life at our borders and in the seas, collaborating with member states and others to enhance search and rescue operations.
We do not have a rescue task, we have a search task, but this search task is an outcome of our deployment for border guarding. So we do not deploy primarily for search and not for rescue at all.
In the spirit of Robert Stewart's book, we understand that managing borders is not synonymously with closing them. Rather, it's about ensuring a balance between security and the freedom of movement.
In the practice, we don't see enough yet, because we would actually like to see that the Greek authorities are simply not able to get away with saying like, oh, we have examined this, but nothing appeared to be true, or that they set up a transparency body with simply a sham construction. We should see some change in the behavior of the Greek authorities, and otherwise we should need to see steps from Frontex.
The legal framework that defines the operations and the function and obligations of Frontex towards fundamental rights and accountability arrangements has remained the same. There has been no legal reform of the constitution of Frontex, to put it that way.
The Commission's role is, of course, to make sure that the agency have the best possibilities to carry out the tasks, and of course that they are aligned with fulfill the regulation.
Actually, to be honest, we asked several times also the Commission, shouldn't there be also kind of external monitor mechanism of the agency, or an external complaint mechanism? And then they say, no, that's too early. Let's first give the chance for the fundamental rights officer and the monitors to develop their activities. And the complaint procedure is also not so old, and then, there's ways to improve it. And I don't know if they say that really because they believe that these internal mechanisms can still improve, or that they just want to keep it there. I'm afraid for the latter.
Ylva Johansson, for example, I think she stated in the parliament that they didn't find any violations in the Aegean pushback cases, and she wouldn't expect any violations.
It's also important to stress that every day, every night, border guards, policemen, policewomen are protecting our external borders in compliance with EU law and fundamental rights.
The whole infrastructure as we know it today, the fence, the border guard stations, which were upgraded to detention sites, this was done in the 3-year period of 2011-2013 with up to 75% funding from the European External Border Fund. So this infrastructure is very much paid for by European money, and is still currently maintained by the European Internal Security Fund. So when a truck that we know is implicated in pushbacks uses European money to change its tires or to fill up with gasoline, there is a very, very valid question about what Europe is doing to monitor where these funds are going and how these funds are being used.
Since the External Border Fund support during 2011 to 2013, the EU restructured its financial assistance into currently 3 main funds.
The Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, AMIF, aims to provide humane and effective long-term solutions to EU's asylum and migration challenges. The Border Management and Visa Instrument BMVI is designed to ensure strong and effective management of EU's external borders, internal security and free movement of people in the EU. The Internal Security Fund, ISF, is set up to help build a safer Europe by fighting terrorism and all forms of organized crime.
During the 2014-2020 cycle, Greece has received a total of 3.38 billion euros in migration management support. Meanwhile, for the period between 2021 and 27, Greece has been granted an additional 1.5 billion euros.
Although this funding needs to comply with fundamental rights law, the way it is used, and ensuring that no fundamental rights law is violated, we have not seen any action from the Commission or any review about how the funding has been used to construct infrastructures that affect movement and might be implicated in violations at the borders.
Look, in all those regulations of ISF and AMIF, etc., there are many obligations for fundamental rights compliance. So it's also up to the Commission, if they get a national application for funding, to assess how the fundamental rights compliance is respected or is safeguarded. In public, she always then refers to that monitor mechanism, and also Commission officials to tell us, like, look, it's not us that need to monitor. For the implementation of the funding, you have national monitoring bodies doing that. But who are in those monitoring bodies? Officials of the governments.
Throughout our research, we have been able to find the composition of the monitoring committee within the FSC program of the free funds, as well as that for the purposes of fundamental rights compliance, a specially designed task force for fundamental rights compliance has been established.
The fundamental rights officer of the ministry, who is supposed to control the respect of fundamental rights from the ministry, is in the ministry. So it's basic legal, how can I call it, principles. I mean, you cannot be the one that is controlled and controlling at the same time. When we try to put to light this legal paradox, the answer from members of the Commission was, I wouldn't get into a rash judgment because he is a nice person.
The monitoring also relies on partners from the civil sphere, who are deemed to assist the fulfillment of the regulations.
Could you tell us a little bit about this process and how this looks in practice, in the evaluation of these funds?
There is no practice. I mean, I found out that we are on the list when you sent me the link. So I know that there have been some meetings with NGOs, not with us. We participated in some meetings, but not in this context.
So there's sometimes one NGO or whatever, but not, having an influential role. So it's also based on a kind of trust in the member states themselves, who have to control themselves, and the Commission stays away from it. The Commission is simply relying on the same officials that are accused of violating the fundamental rights to monitor and to evaluate if everything goes well. Look, that's not the way it can work. That's not the way that you can really seriously fulfill your role as guardian of the treaties.
It doesn't seem to me to be very logical that the EU is financing, let's say, technology or drones or surveillance equipment, but refuses to fund the fence itself. We're talking about an integrated approach in terms of the external border management. And of course, fences should be included in that financing package.
Υπάρχουν και θαλάσσια σύνορα όπως και χερσαία στον Εύρο. Και στον Εύρο έχουμε αφήξεις. Και εκεί κάποιος, παρότι υπάρχει ο πράκτης κτλ., μπορεί να περάσει. Μπορεί να περάσει. Αν, να το πούμε και έτσι όπως λέτε και εσείς, κάνει pushback. Αν βάλουμε λοιπόν το φράχτη, δεν θα γίνεται κανένα όπως το λέτε εσείς. Σωστά, δεν θα υπάρχει ανάγκη. Ναι.
Άρα βάζουμε το φράχτη για να σταματήσουμε τα pushbacks.
Όχι, βάζουμε το φράχτη γιατί εμείς πιστεύουμε σαν κυβέρνηση ότι η χώρα αυτή έχει σύνορα.
Η διαφωνία με την Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή είναι τι είναι επιλέξιμο. Η Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή θέλει να είναι επιλέξιμα τα συνοδά έργα, δηλαδή τα φυλάκια, τα συστήματα επιτήρησης. Αυτά είναι απολύτως εξασφαλισμένα. Εμείς λέμε ότι πρέπει να είναι επιλέξιμος και ο ίδιος ο φράχτης, τα σίδερα που βλέπετε. Η ουσία είναι ότι στην περίπτωση που δεν εγκριθεί αυτό που εμείς ζητάμε, υπάρχουν τα 100 εκατομμύρια, είναι απαραίτητα έτσι κι αλλιώς για την επέκταση του φράχτη και γι' αυτό θα μπορέσουμε να κάνουμε και την τρίτη επέκταση.
The problem is that the Commission is trying to explain that the money that is being used is not used for the walls, but it is used for all the elements or supporting structures around it, which makes it increasingly difficult to distinguish between saying that we don't finance with European money these walls, while we are actually contributing to a wall.
We have asked the Commission for a statement regarding the issues mentioned so far, to which the Commission chose to respond in 7 words.
Despite the fundamental rights violations, despite violations of the principle of non-refoulement, there is no political will to take serious action to stop.
In the end, it's the Commission also being complicit in using everything that's necessary to prevent irregular migration. That they see this maybe as a kind of collateral damage. I mean, it sounds very harsh, but it's after all those years that I really think because if they would take it seriously, they would have undertaken action long time ago already. I mean, the Commission puts a task force there, which is observing a lot, and then everything that the task force leads to the Commission, it ends somewhere, because it doesn't lead to any clear dialogues or comments or condemnations towards the Greek government. At the same time, if NGOs or anyone else files complaints with the European Commission, the Commission said, oh no, but we have a task force. So they also set up constructions themselves in order not to efficiently take action to stop these violations. So how can you interpret differently than they accept this to happen?
We have seen efforts by different member states not only not to stop pushbacks, but in certain cases to incorporate them into future European Union law, to make it easier to deport people from border areas without following legal process.
They disagree among themselves on responsibility sharing, but they are completely united if it comes to keeping them outside of the territory.
Look at the EU and Europe. Do you see anything
suggesting that the international factors will push these countries at the border, Italy, Greece, Hungary, Croatia, Poland, Slovakia to some extent, to change. EU is a moral accomplice to every crime committed by Greece concerning pushbacks. Every crime. Because Greece does it in its name, and EU says, if it doesn't say bravo, it looks, and it's well known that when you look whereas you can prevent a violation, you are liable, and at the political level, you're politically liable.
You have all worked very hard to achieve this, at impossible hours and with much energy and enthusiasm.
You have a reversal of roles. You're welcoming me. Yeah. How are you? So good to see you.
Finally, we encourage the managing authority to continue with the good practices identified during the 2014-2020 programming period, as well as to build on any new recommendations that can be made in the context of the future monitoring committees, with a view to achieving the most effective possible implementation of the programs, hence the most effective use of EU funds. Thank you very much again, and I wish everyone a fruitful continuation of work, and we look forward for continuous good cooperation.
I wouldn't describe it as an entirely inaccessible or hostile area, but I would say it's a border that is quite difficult to navigate.
Even people that would be against border crossing, against refugees, they actually highlight the fact that the Greek government has not supported the land, has not supported Evros, has not supported the locals. So we see something that, while the Syriza administration and the New Democracy administration in many ways supported people in the islands of the Aegean and gave money into the area and had like these new reconstructions and redevelopments and gave something back to the community, to use their own language, we don't see the same thing happening in Evros. So people in Evros feel that they've been abandoned by everyone.
I would add to this the fact that a lot of people depend on the army and the police for jobs locally. Because Evros is a rather poor area without many employment opportunities, the police and army are important in that respect.
The situation gets additionally intensified when one takes into account the complicated history with what lies beyond the border.
There is a legit fear, as far as they are concerned, that there is something going on with Turkey. And something going on with Turkey is the end game that we see many times in these border areas.
The Evros has become a heavily militarized space. Most of Greece's army is stationed there. The rest is stationed in the Aegean Sea. So this makes for a geography that's policed in ways that would not be possible elsewhere within sovereign territory. So it's in a way it's a zone of exception.
Even if research or reporting that take place in Evros have nothing to do with foreign relations or with Turkey, but with border control and migration, which are civilian domains rather than military ones. It's difficult to escape the militarized national security arrangements and infrastructures in the area.
And while for some people it's purely propaganda and a narrative that the state is playing and rolling out in order to secure its goals and objectives, for some local populations is actually a very tangible threat, because this is the only threat they've been hearing about since they were children.
And of course, since 2020, when we had this resurgence of narratives of protecting the border, of being akrites, and our job as the local people of Evros is to defend the border. Well, this has made things worse for border crossers. It has reinforced the perception that these border crossers represent a threat for the area.
When you manage to convince a decent amount of the country's population that there was an imminent invasion from Turkey, but in Turkey, instead of using weapons, it used, precarious people, then it's very difficult to convince them otherwise in many other topics.
All these years is the same story. And depends from the political situation, especially from the Turkish side. If the Turkish side will have a problem, we have many people who wants to cross the river, to cross the border.
Η αντιμετώπιση του κόσμου είναι πάντα η ίδια. Όταν είσαι λάθρομετανάστης, δεν είσαι αποδεκτός στη χώρα μου. Άλλο είναι ο μετανάστης, να μην μπερδεύουμε τις λέξεις. Η αντιμετώπιση του κόσμου εδώ, στο νομό μας, στο νομό Εύρο, είναι η ίδια. Εάν δούμε άνθρωπο να κινδυνεύει, οποιοσδήποτε είναι αυτός, θα πάει να τον βοηθήσει. Αλλά δεν θα επιτρέψει σε κανέναν, να μπει μέσα στο σπίτι του, να πάει να τον ληστέψει ή να τον κάνει οτιδήποτε κακό στην οικογένειά του.
I think we need to take into account the discourses put forward by both political actors and the media in Greece, which construct people on the move as a threat to the security of Greece, to the safety of population, to national identity. And these discourses have been around for decades. So a lot of people are convinced that people on the move are a threat, one way or the other. And for that reason, they support stronger measures for guarding the border. It is a way to keep risks away from Greece.
Again, I wish I did not have to spend, much more than 2% of my GDP on defense, but unfortunately, we live in a precarious neighborhood with a much larger country than us that's also, been behaving aggressively.
Do you believe that it has anything to do with Greek migration policies?
We will see now with fence, because now in the last 2-3 years the border is very, we have many people who work in the border. Frontex, Greek police, army, everything. And we will see.
I have to make sure that I'm also ready for a renewed period of tension after the elections.
How would you deal with that?
With the same way we have dealt with it so far.
I think it's difficult to think of, well, if not your home, the place where you come from, being a theater of violence, and have been a theater of violence for many decades. And also to realize that people in the area live side by side with this violence without necessarily affecting their daily lives or the way they think about the border or migration. Yeah, it's food for thought.
We have to ask ourselves how much we are far of being a human, because all what they face is not a human act. All that violence, all that humiliating, they're actually running from that. But all what they face is all of that.
فيش حاجة آمنة في غزة. تكون انت نايم فجأة ما بتلاقي إلا صواريخ بتنزل. يعني الوضع مأساة ومأساة في غزة. يعني الناس كلها، الشباب اللي زيي أنا في غزة كنت كلهم يعني ناووا يرحلوا من الوضع. يعني احنا فيش، كل حرب ما نخلص منها بعد سنة ترجع حرب تانية. والحرب لا بتعرف هذا ولا بتعرف هذا، قصف عشوائي، شهداء. يعني آخر حرب اللي صارت 45 شهيد في بناية واحدة، عمارة سكنية واحدة.
وصلت للقرار بعد اعتقالي صراحة. أنا كنت عم أدخن سجاير، فوصلوا إنه مسكون الدواعش وقتها وطفوا السجاير بإيدي، هاي الإشارات اللي بإيدي. فوقتها إنه قررت إني أهرب، إنه يعني ما ضل إشي غير إنه المهرب، يعني إنه أخرج من هذا المكان. لأنه كانت ما تسمى حياة، عدم الحياة يعني.
In my city, they were Assad's military, and around us, ISIS. And the Assad military, they were take all the young men to fight. So we had to go out from my city.
Around us, ISIS around us, and they
don't allow the food and vegetables.
You went,
dropped the food from the helicopter.
The Assad military, they take it and give nothing to people, giving us anything.
العيشة بالنسبة للعيشة في غزة، احنا يعني لنا أكثر من 12 سنة حاصرين في غزة. الوضع الاقتصادي كل سنة بينزل لتحت. يعني الحياة في غزة صارت فيش حياة، معدومة. احنا انتوا بتعرفوا العملة تاعتنا يمكن الشيكل، تمام؟ يعني اللي زي انا دارس جامعة مخلص بكالوريوس إدارة أعمال، قعدت مخلص 5 سنين أدور على شغل مش ملاقي شغل، بالآخر اضطريت أشتغل عامل. قديش كان يديني؟ يعني العامل عنا كتير يعني في اليوم بيشتغلوا من الصبح لآخر الليل على 20 شيكل. علبة الدخان لو بدي اشتريها حقها 25 شيكل.
يعني قلت لك بسوريا آخر شيء خطيب البيت شادر هيك منه، الشوب يقتلوا، الهدوم لصقوا على جسمه، الذبان مليون، بالليل بقوا بالنار الذبان طلع. يعني بتريدي دواء تداوينه عزيت الأصلي بالنكعه، قصة الهدوم أحيانا قصالنا أقدر آخر شيء هدومه ما عم نحسن نقدر نشتري هدوم، نقدر نفوت على سوقنا نشتري هدوم. تعرف هدومه بنقعن يومين لا أقدر أغسلن بالفرشاية لأغسلن. يعني أنت برأيك واحد بدشر بلده هيك شطرة بطرة؟
I actually met with the co-founder of Dressur. She found in me that I can help other refugees who are pushed back from Greece or Bulgaria, both of them. So I'm staying in here trying to give help as much as I can. Well, actually, as I told you, Dressur is the only organization that works from this side to help and provide all the help for the refugees who are pushed back, like accommodation, food, and clothes sometimes, because they sometimes turn them back nude. So I'm just staying in here trying to provide help as much as I can, because I don't want to let people, suffer what I've been through.
We're gonna take you to seminar. ندخل احنا منظمة اسمها جسور. المنظمة هاي معنية توثيق حالات العنف على الحدود. يعني شو صار لما حضرتي على اليونان؟ كيف تعاملوا معك الجندرمة؟ كيف يعني احكي التفاصيل اللي يعني كيف يعني أخذوك على الكامب؟
We are here for supply what they need, something like transfer money, something like they wanna eat something. We help them all the way. One day police came to control and took the refugees, take the refugees from here. One of the refugees jumped from the second floor to the street because of afraid of police. And when we realized that police went, we take care of him here for 1-2 months. Because of Edirne people don't want the refugees here. Smallest issues, even in the smallest issues, they call the police and there's a problem. They say that, and the police comes here not only for control. They have some different motivations. I think everybody knows that. What is the motivation? So actually, some things even it's not an issue, but people can call the police. There's an issue. There's a problem here because of the refugees are here. If refugees are not here, they don't call the police. There's a problem.
Did you have many of these incidents in the past?
Couldn't understand.
Did you have many of these incidents in the past?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
But you keep on doing what you're doing?
Yes.
Josur was the only organization in Turkey doing that, the only organization on the other side of the EU's external borders. And it was a really hard decision to end that. And we did face a lot of criticism also from other organizations and volunteers in Turkey specifically, saying it's irresponsible of us to end our operations because nobody else can fill that gap. It was, we discussed for 3 weeks if we can continue in any other way. And basically, none of us wanted to quit. We just decided to stick to our principles that we have given ourselves in the beginning, which is that safety is the priority for both our team members and people we support. And since that was impossible for us to guarantee anymore, we had to end it. With October 1st, 2022, Josur dissolved.
With the civil society blind to new violations, The veil of impunity thickens over the border, leaving many acts unobserved. And covered.
Look, in the one boat, it's about 15-20 people. If we have something in the river, it's very easy to drowning someone. And after that, the river, it's not like the sea. The body, it's the depth. And for this reason, we found the bodies after 2 months, 3 months. For us, it's very, very difficult to make identification in these bodies. Because the situation in the bodies is very bad. We haven't one fresh face to make a photo and I give the photo to the police or the embassies or International Committee of Red Cross. We haven't face, we have nothing. We make identification only with DNA.
However, even the latter is a rather difficult undertaking in the absence of documents or unique features of the deceased.
First of all, we must have found some personal belongings. If we have separate personal belongings, if we have one ring, the family, they know the ring. It's not problem. It's important for me. Why? Because if they know the ring, I have DNA from the body. I take DNA from the families, and I have official identification. The bodies stay here about 12 months in the container outside, and after that, with only with one unique number, we buried here somewhere in one cemetery here in Greece in the area Evros. And we have one unique number from the body. I have in the same number from the DNA samples, and the same number is from all documents. If I have identification after 5 years, I know where exactly is the body, and we can to give the body to the families. Because look, someone who lives, the father, mother who lives in somewhere in Afghanistan, Pakistan, they don't know where is the Department of Forensic Medicine in Alexandroupolis. And they don't know what happened with their son. They don't know nothing.